From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
I'm the director of the Center for the Book in the Library of Congress, which is the reading and literacy promotion arm of the library. And it is also fortunate to be, we feel fortunate that we're also the home of the library's Poetry and Literature Center, which is an important activity for not only the library, but in one sense as the Poetry and Literature Center under the leadership of Rob Casper expands its wings a bit. We're moving, of course, into this wonderful program today, which creates new partnerships, not just for the Poetry and Literature Center and the Center for the Book, but the Library of Congress itself. So we are really celebrating a coming together of many strands. And prior to this program, with my colleagues from the Library of Congress, we were trying to recall another program at the library where our 4 area studies divisions have come together for a program, and we couldn't think of any. So it's really a wonderful partnership and a new beginning for us in many ways. I'm going to set the stage for my colleagues in the area studies divisions who are going to be heading the panels by just trying in 2 minutes to give you some information about the history of the international role of the Library of Congress. Our first library was actually part of the U.S. Capitol. The Library of Congress was created in 1800 in the legislative branch. Thomas Jefferson had hoped that someday it would become, based on his wide collection, the expanse of the content of his collection, which came to the Library of Congress after the British burned the Capitol in 1814. The Jefferson Library was sold back to the library with the idea of reestablishing the Library of Congress, but under a different auspices. Jefferson's wide-ranging library, of course, covered all kinds of subjects, including international subjects. But Jefferson hoped that it not only would be a new beginning for Congress, which needed to know about all of these subjects, but that someday it could be shared with the American people as well, which is the case now. That didn't occur until after the Civil War, and things got pulled together in Washington, D.C. The Smithsonian had been created in 1846, and they created an international exchange program. And as the Library of Congress moved towards becoming a national library, in the 1860s and 1870s, the Librarian of Congress persuaded the Secretary of the Smithsonian to let the Library of Congress be the recipient of any receipts from foreign documents that were sent by the Smithsonian to other countries. And we started building a foreign documents collection, and the Library of Congress took that whole operation over in 1866. In 1870, copyright was centralized at the Library of Congress, and the beginnings were made for the building. The great Jefferson Building opened in 1897. We couldn't develop real area studies divisions until we had substantive collections. The Library of Congress, the functions all come after the collections. A number of small gifts from China and other countries came to the Library of Congress in the Capitol, but we were out of space and couldn't do anything with them. Once the Jefferson, now called the Jefferson Building, had opened and a new librarian had started, his name was Herbert Putnam, and he was librarian for 40 years. And Putnam decided to build on the copyright law, which was building these huge Americana collections, and to begin going overseas and building international collections. And that really started in part with the Eun collection in 1907. So we had this building. Putnam said we needed to be an international library, and he began sending Library of Congress employees overseas to investigate. And the Eun collection was one of the first, the Russian collection. And later on, he sent representatives to China and to other parts of the world, and the basis was laid for the divisions which were all created in the 20th century, last century, that you will be learning about today. The first was the Hispanic, which was created in 1939, and the other divisions, the African and Middle Eastern division, the Asian division, and the European division, in their current form, were brought together in 1978. So this, with the collections, grew the area studies, foreign interests of the Library of Congress, and today it is safe to say, in spite of all of the resource problems that we have, that we are truly a great international institution and in many ways a world library. And this coming together with this new partnership really is a testimonial and a continuation of this wonderful tradition. So thank you for joining us. I'm now going to turn the program over to a second partner. Well, we have two major partners, the International Writing Program at the University of Iowa, where our writers are from, the Area Studies Divisions of the Library of Congress. You will meet the directors, and the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, U.S. Department of State. And the representative is Bruce Armstrong, who is the Director of Citizen Exchanges at the U.S. State Department. Let's give him a hand, and Bruce will really get us started. Thank you for listening to my history lesson.
Well, thank you. It's really great to be here. Before I start my remarks, I just have a brief personal comment to make, which is many, many decades ago, I got a PhD in German literature, which meant that for many years I lived on the planet of literature, and that was the world I was in. Then I started working for the government, and a lot of years have gone by since then. So to be able to be involved with this program now, meet writers, listen to writers read, this is from their works. This is so incredible. I feel like I need to pinch myself, or I shouldn't pinch myself. I may wake up. So soon enough, I'll have to go back to the world of memos and boring meetings. But for while I'm here, wow, this is great. So on behalf of the U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, I'm very pleased to welcome everyone to this afternoon's panel discussions featuring writers from the International Writing Program's Fall Residency. I have a lot of thank yous to say, or some very important ones. First of all, I have to thank Chris Merrill and the IWP staff for their tremendous dedication to this program and all the hard work they invest in it. Without them, no program. That's clear. And it is through this partnership that together we can help writers from all around the world strengthen their voices. Why do we do it? For a very simple reason. Because we believe that in helping writers, we are helping make the world a better place. Simple, naive perhaps, but we truly believe it. Now, that belief is difficult to prove, and it is very difficult to translate into metrics on an Excel sheet to prove the effectiveness of it, but we believe it in our hearts, and we know that it's true. I also want to thank the Library of Congress for hosting this afternoon's event. We are very, very grateful for this partnership. We really appreciate that. And most importantly, I want to congratulate all the writers who I had a chance to meet this morning and listen to them introduce themselves. I want to congratulate all of you on completing the 2014 IWP Fall Residency. And it's so wonderful that you could take part in this program. Probably most of you here know more about the IWP than I do, but nevertheless, if there are some people out there that aren't entirely familiar with it, it's such a great program, I want to talk about it a little bit. The IWP brings together rising and established literary stars from across the world to explore the creative writing process through a partnership with the University of Iowa. During the 10-week fall residency in Iowa City, writers give public readings and lectures, share their work and their respective cultures, collaborate with artists from other genres and art forms, and travel and interact with American audiences and literary communities across our nation. At the State Department, we are proud of our involvement with this prestigious exchange program that has included over 1,400 writers from more than 140 countries since 1967. I mean, that's very impressive. There are actually few programs, few things that can say that they've lasted that long. And the IWP is one of them, and clearly, I mean, it's a tremendous program that has had really major impact. For more than 60 years, the U.S. government has supported international exchange programs that build bridges between countries and cultures and advance important principles such as respect for human rights, freedom of expression, and democratic principles. We support a broad array of programs. We do academic exchanges, we do youth exchange, we do sports-based exchange, and also, definitely last but not least, cultural exchanges. And we believe in the power of exchanges across the board to create personal connections between Americans and the rest of the world, and we believe that cultural exchanges are particularly effective at doing that. Again, very difficult to develop an Excel sheet that proves that, but anyone who has been involved with these programs, and I think Chris Merrill and his team would certainly speak to this, knows that they are effective. We also believe that one of the clearest signs of the vitality of a nation, any nation, is the extent to which art and literature, and that means artists and writers, play a central and dynamic role in civic society. That is a very important barometer for the health of a society, in our view. For the writers on this afternoon's panels, I hope that your experiences in the United States have left you inspired to continue to pursue your creative work back home and to share your experiences with people in your communities, because that's a very important part of this. And we hope very much that you will remain in contact with each other and with the IWP. So thanks again to our partners at the IWP and here at the Library of Congress. It's just a tremendous privilege to be here in this building. This is a wonderful opportunity to hear from the writers in their own voices, and I can't think of a better location to do it than in the Library of Congress, our nation's oldest federal cultural institution and the biggest library in the world. So thank you very much. Oh, I forgot an important part of my duty here, and now I'd like to introduce Chris Merrill, the man who makes this happen.
Thank you so much, Bruce, and to John, and to my colleagues at the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs who make all of this happen. And a very special thanks to the wonderful poet, Rob Kaspar, whose idea was to bring together a big collection of our writers. When we first got together to talk about this a couple of years ago, I think I had in mind that it might be interesting if we could bring together, I don't know, 3 or 4 of the writers just to give a little bit of a reading. And when Rob and I started to talk and he had a sense of how many writers we have, he said, let's turn it into an all-day festival. And I thought, that's just the kind of thinking that is at the center of the International Writing Program. We like to think big. And so this afternoon you will hear from 16 of the 29 writers who have been in residence for the last 11 weeks in Iowa City. They come from all corners of the globe. They write in all forms and genres. They are, as Bruce was pointing out, rising stars on the national stage, on the international stage. They are people who will tell us something about what it's like to live within their own cultures. And it's particularly gratifying for me to be here at the Library of Congress. I was thinking that this has been the home for so long for all the books of the world, but it has also offered safe haven to writers from around the world in many different ways. And I'm thinking particularly of the extraordinary French poet and diplomat Saint-Jean-Perse, who won the Nobel Prize in 1960. He was one of the very few diplomats in Europe between the world wars who understood the nature of the threat approaching from Germany. And he famously stared Hitler down at the Munich conference, where he pleaded with the French delegation not to appease him in any way, shape, or form. He had that wonderful line about Hitler, who he said had the eyes of a dead fish. Accordingly, when the Germans invaded Paris, one of the very first places the Gestapo went was to the flat of Saint-Jean-Perse, who by then had fallen out of favor with the French foreign ministry, the French government, and was in flight. They took 5 manuscripts, which he had written between his first posting in China and up to the outbreak of the Second World War. They've disappeared, never to return. He made his way to America, and it was Archibald MacLeish, the Librarian of Congress, who made a space for Saint-Jean-Perse, also known as Alexis Léger. Perse did not want any kind of a sinecure, though. He insisted on actually working here as a consultant to the library. And one of the things that he did was to put together an annotated bibliography of all the books and texts that one needed to know to be conversant with foreign affairs in the 20th century. It runs to about 900 texts, and it's clear from reading it, which you can find here in the library, that Perse himself had, in fact, read all of it. And it's that kind of broad view of the world, that deep engagement with economics and history and political science, and of course the literature of various countries, that I imagine to be at the center of all great writers. Perse exemplified it. All the great writers of the world find their home here in the Library of Congress. And this afternoon we have the good luck to hear from 16 of our writers who will talk a little bit, read a little bit in their own languages, field some questions from the different heads of the divisions here who have worked so hard over the last several months to put together a program that I am quite certain is going to be one for the books. So please join me in welcoming the writers who will start to make their way up onto stage. And unless, Rob, are you going to say a word? Nope. Then I'm turning it over to the writers. Okay.
My name is Georgette Dorn, and I'm the chief of the Hispanic division. And we have the first foreign area reading room of the Library of Congress, as John Cole said, established in 1939. We also have an archive of recorded Hispanic literature and tape. So I hope that maybe we could record all of these or some of these when they come back to the library again. Our first speaker is Cynthia Edul, playwright, fiction writer from Argentina. Edul's plays Miami, Bonsai Family, The Tour, and A Donde Van los Corazones Rotos have all been produced for the stage. Her novel, La Sucesión, appeared in 2012. Edul is the founder and artistic director of the International Platform of Performing Arts and the president of the Association para el Teatro Latinoamericano. She teaches literature at the Universidad de San Andrés in Buenos Aires. Her participation is made possible by the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs of the U.S. Department of State. Omar Pérez, our second poet, is a poet, essayist, translator from Cuba. He won Cuba's National Critics Prize for his collection of essays, La Perseverancia de un Hombre Oscuro, and the 2010 Nicolas Guillen Award for the poetry for Crítica de la Razón. He is... ¿De la Razón? Ah, bien. Canciones y letanías en lengua franca, with 2 of them appearing as bilingual editions. Something Sacred, as Did You Hear About the Fighting Cat? His recent works moves across media, especially music and collage. He has been an editor of Letras Cubanas and translates contemporary literature from Italy, Africa, the US, and other countries. Our third poet, writer, is Enrique Serrano, fiction writer. Colombia, is the author of books La Marca de España, De Parte de Dios, Tamerlán, Donde No Te Conozcan, El Hombre Diamante, A Passage to India, from Colombia and La Diosa Mortal. He has worked for the Colombian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and is a professor of international relations and politics. Our fourth reader is Natasha Tiniacos, poet, Venezuela. She's the author of the poetry collections Hacia Privada de un Etcétera and the award-winning Mujer a Fuego Lento. Her work appears in Venezuela and in Spanish journals and magazines. She translates poetry for the site The Verbatim Project and is the editor-in-chief of Bacromoc, Caracas, a platform for contemporary Venezuelan art. Her participation is made possible by the Department of State. So with us, Cynthia Edul.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. So I choose 2 paragraphs to read in Spanish. Pero ese día no fue el Chuy nuestro destino. Al llegar a la ciudad de San Carlos, nos detuvimos a cargar nafta para luego comenzar a recorrer las calles del centro en el que se encontraba la zona comercial. ¿A dónde vamos?, pregunté con la voz cortada por el asombro ante ese nuevo itinerario. Mi padre me miró, de repente, como si mi voz lo hubiese devuelto a algún lado de más acá. Se sonrió y me acarició la mejilla. «Qué linda», murmuró, mientras volvía a fijar su vista en el camino que ahora nos conducía por unas calles de tierra, y no respondió, pero la frescura de su rostro parecía querer decir «ya vas a ver». Fuimos pasando por una zona donde había unas casas con jardines, un poco más alejado, chozas inmersas en grandes terrenos, hasta que de a poco desembocamos en campo abierto. A nuestro alrededor comenzaron a desplegarse unas amplias lomadas de pasto verde, pequeñas flores amarillas y líneas de árboles a lo lejos, y un olor a tierra fresca nos fue envolviendo. Sumergidos en ese nuevo paisaje, ya no quedaban en mi memoria ni huellas del mar. Mi padre bajó la velocidad y la imagen recuperó nitidez. La armoniosa y redondeada forma de la tierra, la combinación de los colores, el cielo amplio, despejado, brillante en su transparencia. Bajó la ventana y una ráfaga con aroma a eucaliptos impregnó el aire. La piel de mi padre parecía recuperarse a medida que avanzábamos y yo, desprendida ya de la necesidad de capturar la razón por la que estábamos ahí, me entregué al devenir de ese paseo hasta que nos detuvimos frente a un gran portón ubicado en lo alto de una lomada. Sobre la madera, como un título, estaba impreso el nombre, El Triunfo. «Vení, apurate», me dijo, y se metió por un bosquecito que nacía al costado del camino. Un olor muy intenso, como a zorrino, impregnaba el aire. Avanzábamos esquivando ramas. Vi la sombra de una larga figura cruzar rauda a lo lejos. Seguimos caminando hasta toparnos con un conjunto de ramas que nos interrumpió. Mi padre logró esquivarlas con destreza. Yo tropecé con una piña y caí de rodillas. Él no lo notó y siguió avanzando. Cuando me puse de pie, lo había perdido. Ahora había extraviado a mi guía y tenía miedo. Seguí intuitivamente lo que creí eran las huellas de mi padre, que se mezclaban con otras que parecían también frescas y llevaban la misma dirección. Atravesé un matorral, volví a tropezar con una rama, y la luz comenzó a filtrarse con intensidad, lo que me permitió reconocer que había llegado al fin del bosque. Crucé la frontera de árboles y me encontré frente a un inmenso campo abriéndose ante mis ojos. El cielo amplio como nunca antes lo había visto, grandes lomas que se entrecruzaban en el horizonte, y ante esa repentina y rotunda manifestación de la naturaleza me empequeñecí. Y en el centro de ese espacio, dentro de un enorme cerco de madera blanca, un grupo de caballos de distinto pelaje galopaba al mismo compás. And that's all. And it's I forgot to say that it's 2 paragraphs from my novel La Sucesión. Thank you very much.
I'm going to read 2 poems in Spanish that I've written here in the U.S. Algunas notas sobre porno. Los instrumentos de trabajo están guardados en el corral de los sueños hasta que el dispensador de amenidades los despliega en la pizarra móvil. YouTube is not my tube. You porn and my horn are not the same corn. Los campos de maíz han sido rasurados, reassured, para que la excavadora de heno suspire ante el altar de los fonemas. La tortilla que no está hecha de huevos aspira al pepino que está hecho de agua. El émbolo transmigra, gotas de esperma llueven sobre la caverna de los justos. Los fonemas y morfemas acompañan la conversación del sudor y los requisitos del tacto. Grande y estrecho, amplio y localizado, espacios cerrados, navegación a toda vela, no están en el diccionario de la buena conducta. El anillo de fuego perdura en la conducta de la vida, el tesoro se encuentra a golpe de espada, hablar en lenguas es recomendable. Cada agujero lleva máscara, cada máscara una contraseña, cada contraseña un principio de resurrección, que está sumido en el propio agujero. Oh, ay, vana circularidad de los fenómenos y elementos, vaga temporalidad, el deseo es eterno, la satisfacción efímera, las criaturas innumerables. Golpe milagro. Golpe milagro, las estrellas se encienden solas. El mar está junto a la orilla y en la orilla hay una casa de 7 puertas. El encargado de mantenimiento limpia la cañería del sol. Golpe milagro, la chiquilla se sienta junto al chiquillo, el abuelo junto al nieto, y el juramento cuelga sobre los testículos como una bolsa de orégano. Allí donde está sola hay una mano que sostiene un bastón de plumas de gaviota. Golpe milagro, el desayuno alumbra la caverna de los necesitados, el poeta lava sus pies en té de manzana y la herradura de Pegaso pende sobre el comedor de los sueños eróticos y la merienda de las eyaculaciones. La rubia se peina en el eucalipto, el individuo recoge el paso de los gorriones. Gracias.
Enrique Serrano.
Thank you. I'm going to read part of a short story in tribute to Marcel Schwoff. Se podía presumir que el curtido Ahasverus, el mismísimo judío errante, les sobraría la vida y tendría largos años para quejarse de su amarga suerte de eternidad. Pero lo cierto es que murió pronto después de sufrir mucho y buena parte de sus sueños quedaron sin lograr. Se cuenta que en sus últimas semanas, durante el invierno que habría de dar comienzo al año 1905, se oía su voz claudicante al recordar, como poseída por el delirio, los largos coloquios de la juventud en el Liceo Louis le Grand, las lecturas de Lucrecio, las palabras de duda del príncipe Hamlet, o los gritos de su amigo Guyès por las calles de Nantes, las mismas que vieron nacer y crecer al gran Julio Verne o a los piratas de la isla de la Española o de la Tortuga. Y en las últimas semanas quiso vivir más rápido que en los años anteriores. Se levantaba antes del sol, cada día estaba más lejos, sin embargo, de su amada Margarita Moreno. Y voy a leer, I'm going to read a poem called Soldier of Fortune, Soldado de Fortuna. Troya ha caído, Aquiles está muerto, la copa de la gloria está deshecha. Mi espada es hoy bastión del enemigo, las monedas que obtuve se han perdido, yacen bajo las piedras del desierto. Entre tanto, deambulo por los campos esperando beber el vino nuevo. Mi capa ya raída ha quedado rendida bajo el peso del tiempo. Soy libre, voy desnudo, veo el sol en el cielo. Descubro que estoy vivo y pago el alto precio. Soldado de fortuna descarriado, ignoro el bando al que he pertenecido. Mi sombra me persigue, estoy cansado. La sangre coagulada me ha formado una costra sobre el cuerpo. Pero a mí no me asquea. Aterido, perdido, sin un gesto, revuelvo mis recuerdos en la tierra. Su faz oscura, tenebrosa, tétrica, me lava de mis cuitas y mi miedo. Mis heridas se curan lentamente, mis lágrimas se secan. Las lacras no me pesan en el pecho. Duermo inquieto en el suelo con mis muertos que hablan y se quejan en mis sueños con gemidos amargos. Pero al volver el día, hallo consuelo y la luz me bendice con su fuego. Contemplo las encinas y las hayas, las hormigas me corren por el cuerpo. No sé por dónde iré, si acaso vengo, qué importa, ya sabré, vendrá otro tiempo.
And Natasha Tiniacos.
I'm going to read from my book, Historia privada de un etcétera, Transgénicos. Este es el tiempo de los perros que brillan en la oscuridad. Tiempo en que los monstruos marinos son cables de fibra óptica. Tiempo en que es común ver en la TV una mujer que llora o que vomita. Ninguna realidad es insignificante. Hemos presionado el pedal del instante, derribando el tiempo fugitivo. El pensamiento de la estirpe que lo quiere todo acaba con las sílabas de la lengua primitiva. Nos lleva la ansiedad por el estallido. Somos un pomo de témpera sobre la cama en blanco, a punto de bullir la nueva antigüedad, la era polaroid, no la del hombre erguido, sino de la del que teje, sostenido a sus codos, la inmediatez y la cercanía. Toco la pantalla, piel, con la punta de los dedos más inteligentes que todas las yemas de antes. Las huellas dactilares han evolucionado. Toco el plástico helado y te siento. Te siento. La sala de conversación habla en tiempo compuesto. Tú te has conectado. Eres una acción sostenida. Nacimos sin cordales ni noción de segundo en un mundo puntual con el ahora. Quien quiera que sea yo se difumina. Contigo un ectoplasma, sombra 2.0. No quiero contemplar más mis zapatos. Te escribo, tecleo, te traigo, te necesito tanto. En el tiempo en que los perros brillan en la oscuridad. Tiempo en que los monstruos marinos son cables de fibra óptica. Tiempo en que es común ver en la TV una mujer que llora o que vomita. Ninguna realidad es insignificante. Hemos presionado el pedal del instante, sujetando el tiempo fugitivo.
Now I will ask a question that each one of you should answer. The first question is, who are the writers who influenced you and how? And we'll start with you. Cynthia.
Okay. Okay, a lot, basically, of writers. Just to mention some of them, of course, the commonplace is Borges, Jorge Luis Borges, because he created a system for Western literature. Should I speak in English, isn't it, or in Spanish?
No, English is much better.
Ah, okay. Sorry.
I was
Suddenly,
thinking that you would read translations. I was told that you would read translations. I'm sorry that didn't happen.
Okay. So, and then of course I have to mention for me a writer who is very important in my his private story is Juan José Saer from Argentina. He's a novelist, a very well novelist. César Aira is another one who is very important in my proper my own search in literature. And the third one is Enrique Serrano, who is another novelist, very, very important too. They are practically Aira, Saer, and Serrano from the same generation of writers in Argentinian literature. That's another writer who is very important for me is a short storyteller called Eve Ward.
Mm-hmm.
For me, is one of the best in my country, and she was also very important as an influence in my literary career. Of course, at the same time, I'm a lecturer in the University of Literature, so I have a lot of writers that are part of my work. But if I have to make my selection, my canon, I would make it with these four. I told you.
Very good, thank you. Omar?
Well, I just improvised one list here. I must say that I don't believe in influences so much as I do believe in coincidences. But my list It's Jose Marti, Bob Dylan, William Shakespeare, Pier Paolo Pasolini, and Bob Crilley.
And how have they influenced you, if at all?
Well, as I told you, I don't believe very much in influence. I think that to think of influence in art is a very limited way to look at the way really things operate in life. I think everything has been said already. Many centuries ago, culture already expressed what it had to express as an organism. We are just deaf and blind. We are just not looking. We are just not listening. That's the point. That's why we keep on writing and we keep on doing art, because we are asleep. All we are doing now is finding points of coincidence with other artists and thinkers and philosophers and poets of thousands of years ago. Everything has already been said. They are not really influences, they are just coincidences, because we are going around the same point.
Thank you. Enrique Serrano?
Thank you. I do recognize the influence of narrators in historic novels, and very important for me have been, for instance, Robert Graves and Marcel Schwob, because they picture models of what I could do in some time as a projection of my own interests and concerns. I think, as Omar, that the most important things are already in world literature, but to recognize in order to have this personally and to treasure, to express it, I owe very much to the narrators of the 19th century, especially Flaubert and Balzac and, of course, Dostoevsky. But during the 20th century appeared a very interesting and powerful narrator, Elias Canetti, and I owe very much to him. Thank you.
And how did they influence you again? How did they influence you? In what way?
Because I couldn't find the way to write short stories, for instance, how to say the important things in some expressive way. And I'm very preoccupied with the pureness and neatness of language, the possibility to translation in standard language to every tongue in the world, and the universality of language and the message to say. And with historic affairs, it's very important to recognize that.
Thank you. And Natasha?
I was trying to think of an image to express influence and not to confess appropriation. That is my case. But maybe it's like learning to walk. I think you learn by observation. Of course, reading is our school. And I really want to walk like the Venezuelan poet Rafael Cadenas, the Canadian poet Anne Carson. I think her explorations in genre and her dedication to the classics and the philosophy also, and how it permeates her poetry, makes me reconsider the limits between genre. Also, the African-American poet that just won the MacArthur Genius Award, Terrence Hayes. I have been translating him to the Spanish, and I feel extremely close to his poetry, even though we come from two different cultures, two different languages, but I think we are a coincidence. I share a coincidence with Terrence because we live in the same era with the same concerns and necessity of the digital era, and his case is masculine identity, but in my case is a feminine Latin American identity in this era. Of course, the thought of Giorgio Agamben, I'm a huge reader of his work, and also music. John Cage as a philosopher, and the paintings by Francis Bacon, Again, my language, César Vallejo, and as Omar Shakespeare too. I think we all own him a lot. But again, I really think of, I want to learn how to walk, so I'm going to look how they people walk because I really want to sound like them.
Thank you. The second question is, in your country, what is the literary scene like right now? And how are you a part of the literary scene?
Okay, I start?
Yes,
Okay,
in
I
Argentina.
will be the first always. So.
It's always hard to be the first.
Yes, absolutely.
And we're the first one for the whole group.
Yes, but okay, I'm prepared. The literary scene is in my country. It's pretty huge. Regarding the market, there's a lot of publishing. But what is interesting is that okay, I can talk in a way in the system of literature, like it's a very canonical system with very important writers, which means like what does it mean to write after Borges? That's a very huge question in a way, you know, because we had that kind of figure, and what happened after that change in the system of the or that foundation, we can say, in the system of Argentinian literature. It's a question that you can in a way try to see or what or try. I will do the same when you are talking. Just I promise. And the other point of view for me for this issue has to be more with the publishing, which is very important. Independence, like the under and independent publishing houses.
Independent publishing.
Independent publishing houses. Small and middle, if you want, medium, small and medium, that are a lot, you know, in order to try to avoid a little the hegemony, you say, hegemonia, like the domination. The domination of the big houses that are more from Spain, you know, that the big houses like Alfaguara, Santillana, or Tusquets are from, or Seix Barral are from Spain. So in a way, it's more related with the loss of the market, that kind of
getting away from the
Spanish publishing houses. So the last, I have to say, 20 years, we recover in a way big energy of the publishing, because in the 60s Argentina was one of the most important places to publish in Latin America. Gabriel García Márquez published Cien Años de Soledad in Sudamericana in Buenos Aires, when nobody in Latin America wanted to publish that novel. So you can see in the scene of the 60s how important was Buenos Aires for this kind of movement of the Latin American narrative and Latin American writing. And I think in the last 20 years after the dictatorships and all what that break in the story of the country, we are getting again to that kind of energy that represented a lot of the Argentinian literature. In that system, I am I don't know, not a racing star. I'm not going to think in those ways.
A
but
rising star or a star, right?
No, a star. No, I don't know. Just if I say for myself I'm a star, I can commit suicide after that. So I can't allow to think in those terms. But I don't know. I'm a worker.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Omar, you're next.
I must start by saying that my connection with the literary scene is pretty irregular. So whatever I can say must be understood in these terms. I would say that the literary scene in Cuba, and especially in Havana, Cuba is a very Havana-centric place. Everything is supposed to happen in Havana. Actually, it's not like that, but it's the way it's seen. I see it as a very fragmentary cultural space, not only in the sense of cultural organization, but in the sense of ideas. When I talk about ideas, I don't talk about opinions. That's a very common confusion. And we must also take into consideration that this literary scene, as you have put it, is very much divided by the political situation in Cuba. There is a lot of writers and artists living outside of Cuba, most of them possibly here in the United States, most of them possibly in Miami. And this division has not yet been solved in, I think, fully fruitful terms. So somehow that affects also the life inside of the island. I don't know if I answered your question.
It's your show. You say whatever you want to say.
Okay, I think I say what I wanted to say.
And Pablo Armando is still there, right?
Pablo Armando is definitely still,
He's been here many times. So
yeah,
give him my
sure,
regards.
sure. And Miguel Barnett also, yeah. They have traveled a lot.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Enrique.
I do think the literary scene in Colombia has changed very fastly during the last 20 years, perhaps. And with the recent death of Mutis and Garcia Marquez in 2013 and 14, the void probably will be filled with many voices, with many alternatives. And there are, for instance, very political writers linked to journalism. And there is another kind of experiment in order to narrate intimate stories, history families, for instance, history of families and history of regions, and not neatly Bogotanian stories, in order to have some landscape of the whole country. There are many interested people in historic novel too. Proper history of Colombia, but history of the world narrated in our terms and since our perspective. That's why we found, as a sort of reward, so many young people reading Colombian authors for the first time in our history.
To make their fame abroad, to become famous in other countries, right?
Yes.
Nobody's a prophet in his own country. That's so true of writers, isn't it?
Yeah, it's normal. Yeah, they grew up as writers, especially in Spain or in North America, Canada, and the United States, because it's a wider and very broader alternative to have possibilities to express, but not only in political terms, even in an aesthetic range of possibilities. That's why we are changing, and very fast, I think.
Thank you. Natasha.
Wow, the the literary scene in my country is... Good mistake. Good mistake. Well, is of course politics, our political and economical crisis is influencing the literary scene, because we are experiencing sort of a depression. There's no paper to publish books in Venezuela. Newspapers are closing down too. There's no support from the government to import books. So you wonder, how is the literary scene in a country where small publishing houses are doing whatever? They are like mafias. Oh, I found paper here. We're going to publish a small quantity of books. And also there's no books to read from overseas. But there's this crisis, or sort of shortcomings. They force us to become very strong and to become very stubborn. We want to write anyways. There's a new generation publishing online. Of course, polarization also has to do with our lack of paper or literary scene. The government is financing publications, of course, but you have to pay loyalty. Venezuela had this fame that it was a poet's country. That just poets go, they are the ones known overseas, but there's also a new generation of fiction writers. In Spain, we have Juan Carlos Méndez Guedes, Juan Carlos Chirinos, and of course Rafael Cadenas, who is thriving right now also in Spain and overseas, the poet Yolanda Bantin. I'm throwing names because it's also a way to make you know and take them or make them travel to new readers. And I think so these shortcomings are just forcing us to become stronger and to keep writing to express whatever we think we want to say.
Well, thank you very much. We have time for one more question. In your residence here, what have you learned about the American literary community, and what have you learned about the country as a whole?
Okay.
The United States.
Yes, I know. Me again. First, about the American, the literary American community, it was pretty important. The city of Iowa, which is a city of literary community, very strong, which surprised me a lot because it's now a commonplace between us to say like, oh yes, in Iowa, like you can go and a taxi driver could be a writer in a way, you know, or could be making the MFA of creative writing or nonfiction. So, but that was something that happened all the time. So it was like very, very important, and it's a city that loves writers and that holds writers. So that's pretty unique. So for me, that was very, very, very important to know. About American literature, I think I know a lot because for me it was one of the the literatures which I was more fond to. I think everybody, in a way, you know, there are those kind of masters of literature from Faulkner to Hemingway to Fitzgerald that were very, very important in the moment when I was becoming a big reader. So that's something that it was here. Of course, I can confirm. I think, of course, as all the countries in this moment of globalization, there's still that problem for the young emergent writers how to enter or to how to publish or to enter in the system. So that's still I don't know how the medium or independent publishing houses can work in that way, but I think that kind of huge market could be a very like a kind of frightened for the young writer. So I think I could see that, but at the same time there's I don't know, a lot of movement and energy in that system. At the same time, about America, I don't know. I learned a lot of things. I don't know how to make my enumeration, but I will do it. It's like a kind of first. I was very, very, very surprised for the kindness of the people that hold us, which was very important for me, and also the landscapes of this country that are fantastic, and of course invite too much to think and to fantasize, you know, because there are those, you know, landscapes so that for me were, and those cities, you know. So I think I learned a lot, and now I am the capital. So I hope I will learn more from.
You know, for Borges, the Midwest was the real America.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. And also there's that for me was very important that imagination of the America of the 19th century. I think, you know, that America of Whitman or those kind of writers, and also the moment of the creation of the country, that kind of elegancy in the politics that I'm looking for my country and for a lot of countries. And I think here too, you know, that to try to recover that spirit, I think that's something I don't know, very fond of America.
Thank you. Omar.
The most important thing that I have seen here in America is that America is not a country, it's several countries in one.
That's true.
And when I am in Tuscaloosa or New Orleans, I feel at home. When I'm in Washington, I don't feel at home. As to the literary American scene, of course, there is a lot of potential. But, I hate to say but, it's not my favorite word. I think that an artist and a writer and a poet always has the responsibility to understand the difference between a career and the devotion to what he or she does. And I see a danger in industrializing literature and turning literature into a factory and overemphasizing the role of teaching literature and creative writing. I think that there will always be aspects, probably the most important aspects, of literature and poetry and art that cannot be taught, cannot be turned into an industry, into programs or anything like that. And especially the young people have to be aware of that. That's it.
Thank you very much, Enrique. Enrique?
I've learned many things from America before coming here, and I do try to understand the complexity of every America. When I went here for the first time, it was in 1981. It was a very different country, and in the 90s, in the beginning of the 21st century, America suffers many transgressions and transformations. Some of them desired, some of them not. And as Omar said, literature is one of them. To be aware of the possibilities of expression and not to abandon the purity of the spirit that built this country is probably the alternative to fight on for the future, because we are tempted to a sort of easy beauty and an easy literature, and it's a trap probably for every country and for every expression. But I think North America has a very impressive vitality and a very large future, combining people, languages, expressions, possibilities, aesthetics, etc. And there are many Americas, and we will understand slowly, one by one, in the future. This program is the possibility to begin with, in real terms, the comprehension of the future America.
Thank you very much, Natasha.
I'm sorry, Georgette, will you please repeat the first part of the question?
Okay, it is, what are your impressions of the literary community that you saw here and of the country?
Well, the literary community I was in was Iowa City, and is with the International Writing Program. I think it's the best thing. Since you are starting in this challenging craft, you always say, oh, the International Writing Program, I want to go there sometime in my life. Oh, I always blah, blah, blah. It's like a dream. And little did I know I was going to come to a city that everything is going to be a motivation for writers. You go to a coffee shop and you can feel it. Everything is in their everybody's in their computers because, of course, the writers' workshop. And so many stories about how that town have helped to encourage writing in this country, but also to establish a canon. And the other part of the question is about my...
your impression of the country, of the United States?
Wow. I used to live here some years ago, and I think the lesson is the same. But I'm older. I live in a Latin American country, and as Bruce Armstrong said, I came here actually to, of course, to work on my writing, but also to remember my democratic principles for my country, and that with work you can achieve whatever you purpose on your life. In Latin America, as I said, we have to be very stubborn to achieve we want to achieve in our lives. That's a big lesson. Also, as Enrique said, it's a country of possibilities. And I like to think there are possibilities, and I like to think there's opportunities for whatever you decide to do in your life. And for a writer in a country on its way to develop is very important to have that on mind, to keep working, because if, I'm sorry, sometimes my language just...
No, you're doing very well.
Well, that's my major lesson. You can achieve your purposes, even though it's writing and it's una tarea quijotesca. It's the myth of Sisyphus, but just keep going.
Thank you. And now we can open it for some questions from the floor. No? Okay, so finito?
Finito.
Muchas gracias.
All right, everyone, we're just bringing our second group together for the library's International Writing Program Showcase. I just want to say my name is Rob Casper. I'm the head of the Poetry and Literature Center here at the library. The Poetry and Literature Center tries to promote all the literary programs that the library does, and when I started here almost 4 years ago, I discovered there were a wealth of such programs among the various area studies divisions. I've worked very closely with most of the people here who are representing the library, the chiefs and staff members who are moderating today's discussions. With Georgette Dorn and with the Hispanic division, the Poetry and Literature Center has launched an international literature series and also championed U.S. Hispanic writers, and we're excited to hopefully join them in launching our literary audio archives online and the Archive of Hispanic Literature on Tape online this spring. I've also worked very closely with our next moderator, Mary Jane Deeb, of the African and Middle Eastern Division. Together we launched with the Africa Summit, we launched the Conversations with African Poets and Writers series. It's been a wonderful series and a great way to introduce American audiences to writers from the continent and writers who are here, diasporic writers from throughout Africa. So if you want to find out more about the programs that we do celebrating international writers, you can check out our website, or you can check out the websites of the various reading rooms that are represented here. The Poetry and Literature Center's reading website is www.loc.gov/poetry. So without further ado, let me turn over this program to our moderator, Mary Jane Deeb, and writers representing African and Middle Eastern, the writers that would fall under the African and Middle Eastern Division here at the Library of Congress.
Thank you, Rob, and I want to thank the Iowa Writers Program for having made this possible with the Poetry Center, and Rob has been an absolutely wonderful partner. And I would like to say just a couple of words. I'm the chief of the African Middle East Division that represents 78 countries, the whole continent of Africa, North and Sub-Saharan, the whole Middle East, the Arab world, going from Morocco to Oman, and that includes also Iran, Turkey. And then we have the Hebraic section that includes Israel and Hebraica around the world. So we have 3 regions, and the Central Asia, of course, we cover as well Central Asia, the Caucasus, and we go as far as Afghanistan. So today, the writers who are at the table represent this, represent in a way the countries that the division is responsible for. The first writer is that we'll hear from is Boaz Gaon, who is a playwright, a fiction writer from Israel. And he's had 6 plays produced for the stage: Danziger, Boget, Argentina, The Return to Haifa, Prime Time, and Dress Rehearsal. He's also the author of the novel Gimak's Yellow Bus, published in 1995, and of the TV series The Prosecutor and Prisoner Milo. Gaon teaches dramatic writing at Minsha College of Arts, oversees drama developments for HSCC TV, and chairs the Gaon Center for the Study of Ladino Culture at Ben Gurion University. He has long been involved in Israeli-Palestinian peace organizations and initiatives, and he participates, courtesy of the United States Israel Education Foundation, in those negotiations. Our second writer is Mujib Mehrdad, who is a poet, a playwright, a translator from Afghanistan, and is the author of the poetry collections Gladiators Are Still Dying, published in 2007, winner of the Afghan Civil Society's Literature Contest, The Fishes Have Fled Our Veins, 2008, and Audience, 2009, and of the collection of essays, The Rain Past. He has translated Ginsberg, Plath, Langstone, Hughes, Mayakovsky, Tagore, and others into Dari. He is a board member of the literary organization Kashan Nawisandagan, House of Authors, and teaches Persian literature at Al-Biruni University in Kapisa. His participation is made possible by the Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs at the U.S. Department of State. Our third writer is Mamle Kabu, a fiction writer from Ghana, and she's the author of the young adult novel The Kaya Girl, published in 2012, and is currently working on her first novel. Her stories, which include The End of Skill, shortlisted for the 2009 Kane Prize, Human Mathematics, and Story of Faith, have been anthologized across Africa, as well as the US and the UK. She's the Associate Director of the Writers Project of Ghana, and also is part, her visit is part of the State Department's Educational and Cultural Affairs initiative. The fourth writer is not, as you will see on your program, the writer from Egypt. There has been a change. The writer who has kindly accepted to join us is from Iraq, Sadek Mohammed, a poet, a translator, a scholar. He is the co-editor of Flowers of Flame, Unheard Voices of Iraq, published in 2008, which received a 2009 Independent Publisher Book Award. His literary work has appeared in Atlanta Review, Best American, Non-Required Reading, and elsewhere. He also has a scholarly volume on translation practice and theory. He has translated Maya Angelou's poetry into Arabic, and the collection Ishtar's Songs, Iraqi Poetry since the 1970s, into English. Sadek Mohammed is the Dean of the College of Arts at the University of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq in Baghdad. So we'll now hear from Boaz first. Boaz?
Thank you very much. This is an honor. I'm different from some of the writers here by the fact that I'm a playwright, so I'm somewhat of a disadvantage without 5-6 people following me around who are actors. But I'm going to read from a new play that is about to start rehearsing when I go back to Israel. It's called Michael and Saul. It's a play about two Israeli fighters who are fighting the British occupation in 1943 in Tel Aviv. And the dynamics of that sort of resistance movement is very different from other resistance movements that we know from today and find sometimes very easy to criticize. I'm going to read it in Hebrew, and sometimes it's going to be like a stage direction in English, just so you know where you are. So, is there any, by the way, Hebrew speakers in the audience at all? No, that's a shame. So, the play begins in 1942 in Jaffa. If you can imagine a child, a Hebrew child, driving around on his bicycle And he's singing a song that is a famous children's song that is part of a holiday called Shavuot. And after the first verse, he basically reinvents the words and turned it into a song cursing the English for being in the land of Israel, or pre-Israel Palestine. So I'm going to sing. יום של זיו, יום של אורה, הוא יום חג מתן תורה, יער כרם וגינה, מלאים שירה רינה, אך זהו חג השבועות, חג השבועות. יער כרם וגינה, מלאים ברימונים, כשנזרוק אותם על מוין, אז יפלו לו הביצים, כי אנגלים הם בני זנונים, אנגלים הם בני זנונים. A British soldier enters. Good morning, old chap. שלום. יום טוב, יום יפה, כן, שמש יצא. כל יום היא יוצאת. לא כל יום, לפחות לא בבריסטול. תיזהר, אני מתעמד במעגלים. בסדר, אולד צ'אפ, תיסע אתה על אופניך בכיכרה מול ים יפה, איפה העות'מאנים היו חוטפים ג'וז בשביל להיות סלייבס להם, כמו בחג יהודי פסח. אבל עכשיו היהודים לא פוחדים עוד, ממך בטוח לא. לא רק ממני, מאף אחד, כי בית לאומי אתם לקבל מבריטניה גדול, וביקורים לשבועות אתם במקום בית מקדש צריכים לשלוח לבקינגהאם. וזה רעיון עצום, אני שמחה לשמוע. כי נוכל לשים רעל בלבן ופצצות בלחמניות. אני לא להיות בלט על מורות אתה לחשוב כזה. עזוב את הכידון. אני ללמוד עם רבי על מנהגי מקום, כי ג'רוזלם אני לחשוב זה קראון ג'ול של מלך. אבל למה יהודי יתקם מאז בית מקדש, כמו כידון, זה אני מעקם עוד רגע. תעזוב כבר! תגיד לי קודם למה אתה נוסע במעגלים מול בנק. The boy bites the soldier's hand, flees. The British soldier frantically tries to catch him. כי רצוננו להיות בן חורים. Come here, you little bastard. ואם תיגע לי בכידון עוד פעם, אני אלשין עליך על מחתרת וידפקו בך כדור, ולרבי המלשין שלך גם כן. The soldier gasses the boy. אתה להיות זקיף לטרוריסטים של סטרן, הם לא טרוריסטים. The soldier slaps the boy who begins to cry. הם לקנות לך אופניים אלה, בשביל אתה לומר להם היכן לברוח, לא יש חופש היום ואני מחכה שיפתחו את הגלידה. זה אופניים יקר, מאיפה הכסף? בזה שעבדתי שנה בחלוקת דבר, בשביל להראות לצברים שאני שווה יריקה, למרות שאני יתום מסריח, וההורים שלי מתו בגטו. איפה אתה גר? בבית אדומים דבורקין. דבורקין זה רמת גן. לוקחים אותי משם בחגים, איזה זוג זקנים מרחוב פרוג. The British soldier apologizes. אני מצטער בקבר. השן יוצא מחלון של בנק אנגלו-פלסטינה, אז אני לצאת לפטרול, שישרף הלוואי. גם אח שלי אוהב אופניו בבריסטול, והוא ניסוע עליי בגשם כשאני להתגייס אחרי מטוסים גרמניה, הרגו 300 מעירנו ברייד. בגלל זה אני גם מבקשת לעזור ליהודים לבנות בית. לא פה. אז איפה? יש פה נבלה שמחכה לכם. Thank you.
Hello, thank you very much. I'm very happy that all of you listening to us. I'm coming from Afghanistan, from the north of Afghanistan, and I'm speaking Persian. So I will read a Persian poem. شوی هم داری چه فرقی می کند وقتی چشمان زیبا هم داشته باشی شوی هم داری و چادر سرخ هم می پوشی و اشعه انگشترت وجود انگشتان خوشتراشت را به همه گزارش می دهد و گل گریبانت جای را تزیین نمی کند از جای با خبر می سازد از چیزی وقتی سرمه می کشی و به میان جمعیت می روی چشمهای سرمه کرده ای را به بازار برده ای بندهایی را گسسته ای و با رضایت لبخند زده ای و من چه ربطی دارد که مقصدی در لبخندهایت نیست مهم این است که وقتی به تو نگاه کردم خندیده ای وقتی به تو نگاه کردم تو را در بند یافتم مثل پرنده ای که از شاخه متحرک به میان چوب‌های قفس رانده شده باشد وقتی به تو نگاه کردم آرام خندیده ای تا صدای زنجیرهایت را بشنوم گیرم تارهای از مویت سفید شدند و تارهای موی من مثل سبزه‌های اول بهار تردند وقتی چشمانت در میان نخستین چینهایش جوانی را در نیمه شب وامی دارد که پنجره ها را باز کند و به درختان و ستاره های روی شاخه هایش ساعتها چشم بدوزد چه فرقی می کند که شکمت چند بار بالا آمده است. چشمانت پیش از آن که از آن کسی باشند دو جاندارند مثل همه جانداران دیگر، بیقرار طبیعت آزادشان. وقتی به دریا و درخت می نگری از اشیای طبیعت هم هستند. وقتی به کوچه و بازار می روی از مردان سر راه هم. وقتی روی تخت خواب دراز می کشی از شویت هم. Thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. In Ghana, we write mostly in English. English is also my first language. It's not very common yet for Ghanaian writers to write in the vernacular languages, so I'll be reading to you in English today. I'm reading from my story, The End of Skill, which is already published as a short story, but I'm also writing a novel out of the same story. The story is about a young man who comes from an illustrious kente weaving family, and kente is a hand-woven Ghanaian textile that's quite famous. It's very colorful and very traditional. It was good to be weaving again. He had always loved it and had clearly been a born master from the time he began at the age of 7. He started creating new patterns as soon as he had mastered the old ones. By the time he was 14, his father would boast, "As for Kweku, my firstborn, I can sell his work to a chief and tell him I wove it myself. And all he will say is, Ejakwame Mensa, you've done it again." In his loom, Jimmy found an inner peace which he never found anywhere else. It was another world in which he and his art became one and did not need anyone or anything else. The design flowed out of him and into the cloth. He worked for hours, feeling neither hunger nor thirst. The disappointment of not finding a job and the tension over his uncertain future were lulled to sleep by the rhythm of the loom as the heddles parted the warp threads and the shuttles flew through, trailing their colors behind them. He had often secretly watched his father at work. Even before he wove himself, he knew that otherworldly look on his father's face and understood that stopping work and climbing out of the loom was a transition from one world to another. The closest comparison he could think of was waking from sleep. He knew that not all weavers felt this way. Back home in Adaomase, weaving was an occupation which all young boys were expected to follow, and many did so simply because it was the family tradition. They learned the technique and produced acceptable pieces of cloth, but they never became masters. True kente masterpieces were made by weavers who entered another world when they climbed into their looms. It was not a topic one ever heard discussed. He always knew which of his father's apprentices were destined to become masters, simply by watching their faces as they wove. He knew his father had seen it in him too, but they never talked about it until the day of his Thanksgiving ceremony. It was a great day when Ejakwame Mensa, bursting with pride, officially declared his first son a competent weaver. After Kweku had presented the customary drinks and a fat white ram to his father, and the requisite libation had been poured for a prosperous weaving career, they sat down to discuss his future. That was when the old man finally realized that his son did not want to be a weaver. He could not take it seriously. "Kweku, I've always been so proud of you. You're my firstborn and the best weaver in the family. Yes, one day you'll even be better than me. I know it already, and I thank God for it. What more could a father ask?" Kweku was ready. He had rehearsed the scene dozens of times in his head already, made a mental catalogue of all his father's possible protestations, and prepared answers for each one of them. He was deeply sorry to spoil his father's joy on such a day, but he knew this discussion could not be postponed any further. He was certain it would not end acrimoniously, for the two of them had an understanding beyond the usual filial relationship, which hinged mainly on respect from the son. Although he was not altogether conscious of it, this special understanding was not unrelated to their mutual belonging to that other realm which they entered through the loom. It was also due to this special understanding that Kweku knew he could no longer keep up the pretense of wanting to be a weaver. If he was dishonest about it on such a momentous day, it would be even more difficult for his father to forgive him later on. He had never actually misled the old man on this point. However, the assumption that he would become a weaver was so strong that nothing short of a direct refutation would shake it. Kweku's silence on the issue had never been interpreted in any way as ominous. Now, finally, it was time to speak. And there I shall leave the story. Thank you.
You say something. Hello, everyone. Our honorable moderator said everyone is allotted 2 minutes and a half, but I've seen my friends have taken their liberty, so I will take my liberty too. So this is a poem that I wrote in 2003, exactly before the invasion of Iraq. It was a very complicated moment. On the one hand, we're having a chance to get rid of dictatorship. On the other, the means was war. And I was left with nothing but assumptions. I called it an assumptions. افتراضات. سنفترض أنك حين تخرجين ستخرجين من لحاء أيامنا، تدهنين رؤوسنا بالماء وتمنحين أوقاتنا طراوة أكثر. سنفترض أن الريح ستفك أزرار ثوبها وتدعك جلدها الأملس بماء الورد والعنبر ليراق أريج النسائم على بشراتنا السمراء. سنفترض أن العائدين سينخلون الزمن الماضي كيما تظل أكثر الأشياء ديمومة وأكثرها مداواة للحب وللحرب. سنفترض أن حينما نقول للبحر أن أثداءك لا تصلح للرضاعة ولا للمداعبة يقترح هدنة على قواربنا الهرمة. سنفترض مجرد فرض أن سننام فوق سطوح منازلنا أو نحظى بغبش صيفي عبق برائحة خبز أمهاتنا. سنفترض أن نرى آباءنا يهرمون أمام أعيننا وأبناءنا يجيدون لهجاتهم وأن نقول وداعا لأحبتنا حين تتخطفهم المنون. سنفترض أن سنعشق نساء بحياء جاراتنا أو أن نضيع في مجاهيل مدائننا ونسكر في حانات بغداد أو البصرة أو أن نوقد شمعة في كنيسة في باب المعظم أو أن نقف على باب المراد كي ترش السماء علينا فراشا بلألأة مرايا الضريح أو أن ننوح بلا وجل مع النائحين على الحسين كي تتطهر أرواحنا ونعيد فتح الطرقات ونردم الهوة الفارغة. سنفترض أن سنعيد تسمية الأشياء كي يكثر المؤمنون بالشمس وتفك النسوة أحزانهن. سنفترض أن سنشهد شروقا فراتيا بلون الورد يعيد التوازن بين الضوء والعتمة. سنفترض أنك ستأتين. يحق لنا أن نفترض. سنفترض أن فقط لا تدعينا كلب لها تعالي آمين. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I think all your presentation were extremely inspiring. I understood some, but not everyone's. But you've all been influenced. You've all been reading. You cannot be a writer without being a reader first. So who are the writers who have influenced you, and how have they influenced you? We'll begin with Boaz, but then the next question, I will start with Sadek. Okay. But let's begin, that's it. So we won't always have one be the first.
So I have about 45-minute lecture about that I prepared here. No. So, you know, I think I'm coming from the theater tradition, so I would divide it to, you know, theatrical influences and prose influences. In terms of the theater, I mean, there's no surprise. There's a long tradition of playwrights whose approach to the theatrical, you know, work is through words and through the play, as opposed to, you know, directors who look at the theatrical experience as a visual experience. So I did a little tree. It's not going to surprise any of you. Shakespeare is on the roof, and then Beckett is on the penthouse, and then, you know, if you go down the floors to the basement, which is where I am, you have Pinter, Albee, Williams, Miller, and then the generation after that, you have people like Edward Bond in London, David Hare, David Mamet in the US, Carol Churchill, and others. And right now you have a younger tradition of writers, two of which I really like are Martin McDonagh, who's Irish, and David Harrower, who is English. And you know, what's interesting about this tree is that if you ask any of them, they would paint practically the same tree, excluding myself, of course. In terms of prose, you know, sometimes this exercise in newspapers build the perfect, you know, soccer team. So you would take Maradona and you would take Pelé and you put all of them together. So I try to build like the perfect writer. If I can imagine a body, I would take the heart of David Grossman, who's an Israeli writer, David Grossman, and I think he writes with honesty and heart, and it's impossible to go through a David Grossman book without, you know, feeling something very, very deep in your chest. I would take the brain of Nabokov because of his humor and sophistication. I would take the loins, just because he's coming after Nabokov. I would take the loins of Jack Kerouac because of his energy and innocence. I would take the limbs of Norman Mailer because of his, you know, humor and his tendency to make trouble, even when that trouble is unnecessary. And I will take the tongue of Tom Wolfe because of his, you know, language and ambition and speed. When you read him, you get a sense of speed. So that would be my answer to your question.
Great, thank you. Okay, Mehrdad, yes.
I'm a Persian poet, and for Persians, poetry is a very ancient tradition, and in America there is only Rumi known, but the Rumi ancestors like Attar, like Sanai, and there are lots of great Persian poets that they are not still translated into other languages. So traditionally, I'm coming from this background. In our homes, we put the Hafiz collection of poetry with our holy book together. So, and the people, for example, assume that Hafiz is someone like a messenger, and of course every poet is like this in my tradition and culture. Poets are like messengers, and I'm very lucky that I'm living in a country that poets are more famous than fiction writers. No novelists can compete with us. But of course I started studying Persian classic literature because I studied Persian literature, and now it's 3 years that I'm teaching Persian literature. But later on, I found myself very curious about to understand what's happening in other corners of the world. For example, I liked an Israeli poet, Alterman. I translate some of his works in Persian. I'm in love with Arab poets like Badr Shakir Sayyab, Mahmoud Darwish, Nazar Qabani, Adonis, Nazik al-Malaik. I have read all of them, which has been translated, all their books that translated. And also I have studied European poets too. I found myself like a literal tourist. I really wanted to go to every corner of the world to experience the spatial taste of the literature in, for example, China, in Japan. For example, once I was studying haiku, Japanese haikus, from the classic to the modern. So it was, I think, for me, reading of literature was a kind of recovery and a kind of hobby and a kind of entertainment, because I'm coming from a country that I have lived all of my life in war, of course. I have born in 84, and it was war in Afghanistan, and still it is war going on there. So the only thing I found, it means in materialistic aspect, our life is like looking like a disaster in these 3 decades. But it was one of the reasons that I went deep into world literature and to get involved with this literature and be with this literature in order to find a kind of spiritual, what I can say. So it helps me too much for recovery, and I found myself lucky that I'm reading poetry, and in the other hand, as a professional poet, I was looking for static possibilities. And I want, for example, I have been a very restless poet too. Once I started with Persian classic forms, I continued with Persian modern poetry, and then after 1 year ago, I published a language poetry book, and nowadays I'm returning to another style. I'm trying to find my own style. So. And I think this restlessness comes from the vast involvement of myself in poetry, and I cannot avoid any taste. So I really like all of the tastes of the world literature, and I found myself very lucky. Like Lorca, for example, once I was under the Lorca's poetry, influence of Lorca, and for example, Ted Hughes. I have been. My recent book is called Soldiers. It's a thematic book, and it comes from the thematic book of Ted Hughes, Cruz, and I really like him very much, despite this writing thematic books. And there are lots of. I think I cannot say it. I have been influenced by all of the poets I have read.
Thank you, Mujib. Mamle?
I read voraciously as a child, so I think I'll have to mention at least a couple of my favorite childhood authors. I grew up in Ghana, or at least I spent my childhood in Ghana and moved to the UK at the age of 14, where I spent the next 10 years. And so let's say my youth was kind of split between Ghana and Europe, or Africa and Europe. However, when I was a child, there wasn't very much African literature for children available in Ghana, so we read mostly foreign authors. And one of the authors most freely available in Africa at that time was Enid Blyton, whom we all read voraciously. But I think the writer who lingers most in my mind, and perhaps therefore who has influenced me the most from my childhood, is Lucy Maud Montgomery, a Canadian writer who wrote Anne of Green Gables, which really was my favorite childhood book. I think two things stick out for me from that series, especially the first one, which I really think is the best. I think her characterization was very strong. She was able to make the orphan heroine of her book so lifelike that I've always thought of her as a real person. And also the description. I love the description in that story. I always remember the ride which brings the orphan Anne home to her new home in Avonlea, where she sees, she keeps asking about the landscape, what's this, what's that, and the man who's driving her, who's to become her foster father, Matthew, or her adoptive father, says, oh, that's Barry's Pond over there. And she says, how can you call that Barry's Pond? That should be called the Lake of Shining Waters. And I think that capacity to see the beauty in things and to describe things as they appear, you know, that's something that stayed with me. So I'd say she was definitely a childhood influence. And then, as I said, in my teen years, I moved to the UK, and I also studied languages and literature for my first degree. So I then read quite a lot of European literature. Some of the ones that perhaps influenced me the most were 19th and 20th century French literature. I'd say for the 19th century, Flaubert and Balzac, I particularly enjoyed. And then in the 20th century, Jean-Paul Sartre, Albert Camus. I think just the freedom of the postmodern writers, the styles like the nouveau roman, the new novel, introduced me to the concept that it's really, the sky is the limit, really. If you want to be an artist or a writer, a creative artist, you don't need to feel bound by pre-established forms. You can experiment with style. I think that's the lesson that I took away from 20th century French literature and other readings that I've done subsequently, of course. My other great love in university was Latin American literature. I studied that quite a lot. So when I named these favorites, this is after reading German, French, Spanish, and Latin American, and of course, lots of English literature. Sorry, I've left out, English literature is a great love. Thomas Hardy is a favorite. Evelyn Waugh is perhaps one of my greatest favorites. But back to Latin American literature, I fell in love with the short story by Julio Cortázar. He made me love short stories and perhaps made me write them. I don't know, but I really, they've always stuck in my mind. Cortázar's short stories are unforgettable to me. And then Mario Vargas Llosa was also one of my favorite Latin American authors. When I started writing myself, I inevitably drifted into the world of African literature, although, of course, I had read some African literature prior to that. Chinua Achebe, no Ghanaian child can escape in school, although I didn't read him in school because I was out of Ghana by then, but I read him quite willingly of my own free will and just loved him from the start. I think Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe is probably the book that I've read the most times of any book in my life. And I think what I love about it and what has influenced me about it is the simplicity, the power in simplicity. I can read that book so many times, not for the plot, which of course I know after reading it about 10 times, but for the power of the simplicity of his language. This is something I love very much. And also, I admire the way in which he can present a very complex picture of events and not take sides. He just presents events the way they are, and the reader makes their own decisions about them. And I think that has influenced me very much, actually. So Achebe was my first big love in African literature. And now, of course, I know many African writers personally, now that I am one myself. I've been to several workshops and festivals on the continent. I've met personally many African writers of today that are known. I would say that Chimamanda Adichie inevitably has also influenced me. I also attended her workshop in Lagos in 2009. And I think Nigeria in particular is perhaps the country in Africa whose literature I read the most and enjoy the most. This is just my personal preference. It's not to say anything more than that. I also very much admire the strong women writers from Nigeria of today. There are several contemporary ones. I'm very fortunate that I know several of them myself. Sefi Atta is one that I particularly admire and whose work I read a lot, as is Molara Wood. Shadi Adeniran. I could go on, there are many of them. I admire the way in which these women write about social issues, but make it, I mean, you don't really realize that you're reading about social issues, you're just reading a novel, but I think they're very good at bringing out. Have I gone over? Sadek, are you the timekeeper?
He was accusing
okay.
me of, he was expecting me to speak for 45 minutes. I said, it was not me.
Okay. Okay, I'm almost done. Yes, and of course, these are strong feminist writers as well, and that is another aspect that perhaps influences me. Okay, over to you.
Okay, Sadek. It's up to you now.
No, I really, just to disappoint Boaz, I will be very short. I should say that, of course, I want to say something, you see, because in the previous panel, our colleagues were saying that influence is coincidence, we remember. In my view, influence is like influenza, as you've seen, how many writers, yeah. So I think it's inevitable that all writers, one way or another, are influenced by the previous writers. That's why we have people speaking about every text is an intertext of everything that was written before it. So in a way, then I was also influenced by many previous writers. But because I'm divided between two cultures, on the one hand, my own culture, Arabic literature, that is to say, and on the other hand, I'm a professor of English poetry, so you see, I have this schizophrenic divide, so to say. Yeah, I was influenced by many writers from my own tradition, from the classicals up to the 20th century. So to mention just a few, of course, all the classicals, without any exceptions, especially in their ability to, you know, write musical poetry. And of course, in the modern, in their ability to do away with all the metrics, so to say, of traditional Arabic poetry, yet were able to, you know, create wonderful works. So to mention a few names from the 20th century, like my friend mentioned, an admirer, and I have been influenced by Mahmoud Darwish, by Sayab, by Nazik Malaika. If I go to the Western tradition, you know, then I'm very much caught between these two moments, the romantic on the one hand, Shelley, Wordsworth, Coleridge, Blake, Byron, and what I call the Eliotine moment. So my love is divided between these two. Of the other European writers, of course, I'm a big admirer of Ritzers, Lorca, Neruda, Pushkin, Lermontov, Rimbaud, just to mention a few. And I didn't speak for 45 minutes.
No, actually, it's fascinating how many of the writers you all admire. I mean, Lorca was mentioned almost by everyone, and you know, I mean, it's quite remarkable. But I want to continue with Sadek with question number 2.
Mm-hmm.
And since you've started with this, why don't you continue and talk about Iraq or the region, the Arab world? What is the literary scene like right now?
Well,
and how do you feel that you're a part of it?
Well, you know, it's a very difficult question.
Yes.
But let me tell you, it's very much like a noisy bazaar where everybody, full of peddlers, of course, everybody is trying to, so to say, sell his own wares. We have, on the one hand, you know, the classical tradition continuing up to the present moment. We have on the other the revolutionaries, the pioneers, we call them, the revolution that started in 1948 with the 4 Iraqi poets, Sayab, Nazik, Buland, and Abdulwahab Bayati, that changed the face of Arabic poetry in general. So these two traditions are living side by side even today. And then we have, you know, the development that came as a result of this modernist movement with the prose poems and prose poetry, so to say. So you see, the three lines are still there, very much present, and in conflict sometimes. I find myself very much, you know, at peace with all the three. I don't have any problem with any one of these. So this is when it comes to poetry. But when we talk about the novel, for instance, and my friend Mehrdad mentioned that in his country, the situation is probably very true of my country too. Poets still have, you know, the, so to say, the upper hand. But I think for the last 10 years or so, I witnessed a retreat in the, let's say, status position of poetry in literary life, and the rise, at least in the Iraqi context, and the rise, I'm sorry, of the novel. Many novelists being famous, many novelists are writing wonderful novels that are, you know, can be considered in Western terms as bestsellers, winning awards, which is, you know, very strange when we talk about Iraq. In the Arab world, people say poetry starts in Iraq and ends in Egypt, and the novel starts in Egypt and ends in Iraq.
Yes, and they also say in Egypt they write, in Lebanon they publish, and in Iraq they read. That's right. But I see now they write as well.
Yeah.
I wonder where Israel is at in that triangle.
Yeah.
You asking me this question? Right. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
So,
I forgot the question. What was the second part? So
yes,
what is
how
going
do
on?
you feel? How do you feel? But how do you feel as part of it?
I'm part of the. I can't say that I am outside what's going on. I'm part of all this struggle, this competition. Yeah. You know, there are extremists when it comes to some of our colleagues. For instance, the modernists think that some of the radical modernists feel that all classical poetry is nonsensical and we should do away with it. On the other hand, you see, we have classical writers who feel that all modernist poetry is nonsense and we should do away with it. And yeah, the battle goes on between these two generations. I'm at peace, so to say, with all these people. I don't have any problem with classical poetry, and I think it has its own beauties. And I don't have any problem also with modernist poetry. I've been practicing it, and I feel it also has its own beauties.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Mamle?
Yes, I like your imagery of a bazaar. Yeah, I think in Ghana also, we went through political turmoil in the late 70s and 80s, and many things subsided at that time, including the arts. And I think the 90s saw a picking up of that, and the writing scene in Ghana is quite an exciting one right now, and I'm very much a part of it. I feel you know, yes, I do feel a big part of it. There are a number of organizations that are trying to promote voices of very young writers who have never published anything but want to enter the writing community. There is the Ghana Association of Writers. There is the Mbasem. Mbasem is a group put together by Ama-Ata Edu, one of Ghana's best-known writers. And then there's also the Writers Project of Ghana, of which I'm an associate director, as you said. And one of the, well, a few of the things that we do in the Writers Project is we have a weekly radio show where we host about 3 or 4 writers at once, and these can be people who just contact us and say, you know, I'd like to read a poem, people who have never been published before or never read in public before have a chance to air their voices and to enter the writing community. Also, we originally founded what they call a talk party, a halakasa, which is I think it's once every 2 weeks, a spoken word event where anybody can just come and perform. And we also do writers' workshops. There is now another new organization called the GERD Center that does writing workshops. So I think it's a very bubbling scene. It's very lively. It's fun to be a part of, and I enjoy being a part of it.
Okay, thank you. Mujib?
Afghanistan from the 80s, it was the country of immigrant poets and writers. After the Russian invasion, writers start to leave Afghanistan. They went everywhere. And again in 90s, during the civil war, another wave of immigrant writers start from Afghanistan. They came to neighboring countries like Afghanistan, like Iran and Pakistan, and they start their writings there. And during the Taliban, actually no one was inside Afghanistan. But after the fall of Taliban, the Kabul is now in one decade is the center of the core of the lateral movements and lateral activities in Afghanistan. After the fall of Taliban, all the writers start coming to Afghanistan from all other countries with all different experiences. With their, for example, Iran was one of the very famous and active center of the immigrant poets of Afghanistan. They produced very high quality literal staffs. They came to Afghanistan. The writers from Europe, from America, and from Pakistan, they returned to country and they start writing there. And actually, after the social media in Afghanistan, after the enlargement of internet and people's access, another literal revolution started because we are three countries, Persian, like Iran, Tajikistan, and Afghanistan. After the enlargement of internet in Afghanistan, now it is 10 days that we have daily debates with our Persian speakers and poets and writers in Iran, in Tajikistan, and all over the world. It means now we have the possibility of reading daily each other's products. So it caused a very, a vibrant literal product in Afghanistan. It means in this decade, most of the good poems has been written, most of the good, as Sadek Mohammed said, I am agree with him that in this decade in Afghanistan, writing novel is now getting famous, and most of the even poets are starting to write novels. So, and I am part of this movement. I am part of this, and I have been, as Dr. Mohammed Sadek said, I have been linked with many different movements like radicals, classics, because I'm teaching in the university. I cannot reject, and no one can reject the classics. They are, but also I have linked with avant-garde poets, and I was practicing writing avant-garde poetry, and so I am part of this scene now. I'm representing that scene.
Wonderful. Thank you. Boaz.
The literary community in Israel is in deep crisis. I was part of a group of playwrights and actors and directors who several years back signed a letter in which we refused that our works be shown across the Green Line in the settlements, because the first ever big theater was opened in the settlements, at settlement of Ariel, partly government funded. The reaction was severe. The Minister of Culture called us, said that we are destroying the state of Israel. The Minister of Finance said that whomever will mess with Ariel will have him personally sort of find way to retribute the people who signed the letter. And the mayor of the town that I live in said that he will not let the artist who signed that letter enter his town. So right now the community is suffering. The book industry is in deep crisis. And I think that for a literary community to exist, there needs to be a linear sort of, progression of reality. And when a country is in conflict, and I'm sure that Mujib and Sadek can identify with this, when a country is in conflict and security takes priority upon anything else, there's a tendency of human beings and writers are part of that community of human beings. They tend to close in and sort of shut off, the whole notion of community and just take care of their own kids and in their own homes. So in that sort of scenario, I feel lonely. Which is why the IWP to me was a gift. I said this morning that the IWP experience is somewhat like rehab, but it's also like a support group. There's soft carpets everywhere, and there's a river outside of the window, and 29 sort of people meet every Wednesday. And what we're going through now is basically withdrawal symptoms because we are about to be expelled from that environment. And I hope that things will get better in the future, but it's looking pretty complicated right now.
Thank you, Boaz. And since we have a few minutes, no more? Okay, we don't have any more. So I want to thank you all. I mean, that's been fascinating. Let's give you a applause.
Good afternoon. My name is Victoria Hill, and I am Assistant Chief of the Asian Division. The Asian Division and its reading room cover the areas and the countries from South Asia, Southeast Asia, and China, Japan, Korea, and Mongolia, and Tibet. With over 3 million books, periodicals, and newspapers, a large number of manuscripts and electronic media, the collections of the Asian Division are the most comprehensive sources of Asian language materials outside of Asia. Our area specialists, reference librarians, and technicians provide in-depth reference assistance on questions concerning Asia and recommend materials for our collections. So we encourage everybody to write us, check out our website, and learn more about the Asian countries that we cover. This afternoon, I'm very pleased to have 4 writers that will speak with us today. And the first writer is Binayak Banerjee, fiction writer, poet, playwright. He's from India, and he's the author of novels, A Year in Sohagini, 2008, The Winner in 2009, and Star Harbor in 2011. The poem collections, You My Life, You Alien, 2008, and 100 Love Poems, 2013. And in 2013, the play Rabindranath Public Limited, 2013. He writes for Bengali literary magazines, is engaged with the Shakespeare Society of Eastern India, and teaches English at the Sri Ram Roy School and the Simprasad College in Kolkata. Bernice Chauly is a poet, nonfiction and fiction writer, playwright, filmmaker, and is from Malaysia. She is the author of the poetry collections Going There and Coming Back, 1997, The Book of Sins, 2008, and Okalo, 2013. Also, the short fiction book Lost in KL, 2008, and the memoir Growing Up with Ghosts, 2011, which was the winner of the 2012 Reader's Choice Awards for nonfiction. Her award-winning films have screened at international film festivals. Chauly is the co-founder of Rhino Press and of Malaysia's longest-running literary platform, Readings, and the curator of the Georgetown Literary Festival. She teaches creative writing at Taylor's University. A little out of order. Let's see. Yoon Heekyung is a fiction writer from South Korea, is the author of 13 books of fiction, including the short story collection To Try Talking with a Stranger from 1996, Inheritance in 2012, Beauty Looks Down on Me, 2007, Like No Other, 2014. The novels Save the Last Dance for Me, 1998, Secrets and Lies, 2005, Let Boys Cry, 2010, and Just Your Life, 2012, and more. Her work has been translated into 7 languages, and she has won numerous awards, including the inaugural Moonhak Dongni Novel Award for her 1995 novel, Gift from a Bird. Chen Li is a poet, essayist, and translator from Taiwan, the author of 14 books of poetry, among them Animal Lullaby in 1980, Love Song of Buffet the Clown, 1990, Lightly Slowly, 2009, Me City, 2011, Evil Exorcised, 2012, Dynasty Saint, 2013, and Island Country, 2014. Together with his wife, translator Chong Feng Ling, he has published some 20 volumes of poetry in translation, including that of Plath, Larkin, Haney, Neruda, Paz, and Szymborska. He is the recipient of the National Award for Literature and Arts, the China Times Literary Award, and the Taiwan Literature Award. Chen Li has taught creative writing at National Donghua University and is the organizer of the Pacific Poetry Festival. I am happy to have our authors here today, and we will ask our first author to come and read from his work.
Good evening, and thank you, everyone. Oh, thank you. I come from India, which is a multilingual country, and it has 20 vibrant languages. And I write in a language which is easy to translate into English and difficult because it's a very rhythmical language and a musical language, and it has been awarded the prize of the most musical language by the UNESCO. So just how things go in my language, I will try to give you an example of my one poem, and I will read another poem in English. I would not necessarily read the translation. This is my Bengali poem. তুমি জল থেকে উঠে জানি ভাসছো হাওয়ায়, তুমি বসছো আবার কারো ছোট্ট দাওয়ায়, তুমি চাও দিতে চাও কত মুকুট আমায়, আমি রিপু করি রোজ ওই পুরনো জামায়, আমি কাঠ কেটে খাই চলো তোমাকে খাওয়াই, ভাত গরমা গরম ঢেলে মুসুর কলাই, শোনো ডাকা বুকো ছেলে আমি খাটতে তো জানি, যদি ভালোবাসা মেলে আমি মন থেকে মানি, থাকে রাধার আঁচলে বাঁধা, থাকে রাধার আঁচলে বাঁধা কৃষ্ণ আমার, এই হাত দুটো সোনা দাও লোহার কুঠার, দাও লোহার কুঠার, দাও লোহার কুঠার. This is the way my language goes. So I will read a poem in English. So since it is so musical and so rhythmical, as I was saying in my language, if you say, if life gives you another chance, you will go and watch a wild peacock dance. It becomes বন ময়ূরের নাচ দেখতে যাব, বন ময়ূরের নাচ দেখতে যাব. like this. So it, when translated into English at times, if not done very carefully, it becomes a bit prosaic, but still we have to do that. Straight line. When blood becomes wine and flesh transforms to bread, I gradually start feeling hungry. Without snogging my tongue upon yours, I realize a universe of arrogance dwelling upon it. We need a straight line, just one straight line, where we would stand on both sides like two ends, and above us there would be storms, there would be birds, just as love cruising over events. I wanted to bring it down with a symphonic cry, but it can't hear, nor can it see. Albeit, it leaves behind on any door the bloody prints of feet adorned in red. I have toppled it, like an untouchable, touching the shrine while barging into a temple after 1,000 years of struggle. I have touched you. You might kindle the lamp now. Darkness doesn't scare me anymore. Do I have time? Mm-hmm. Okay. So I would just read the last portion of a poem, Towards an Ocean. Why make me listen to an ocean's song when I haven't heard your voice for so long? As night descends, my eyes behold a sleeping blanket on my father's shoulder. If like my father ever or soon, you sit beside me and show me the moon, if not myself, I might just lose that thank you that sounds more like abuse. Promise me, persecute me, yet to come. Throw 10 pennies to a beggar as humble alms. Before my death, when you I will call, don't answer my phone, but turn the phone towards an ocean if you receive it at all. Thank you. Mm.
Good afternoon. It's an honor to be here. I'll read two poems from my third collection of poetry called Onkolo. This is called Sometimes. Vindula deone erotela, delias oraya, urania lelus, grapium sarpedon, apias nero figulina. Papa, I repeat the names of common Malayan butterflies from the book that used to be on the long white shelf in our house in Taiping, where my memories begin. Papa, I fear I will never recover. I know this kind of love begins and ends with flowers, not words, not alcohol, not tears, not even sadness. Papa, I am tired of the earth. I remember catching butterflies. They lived for a while in tall glass bottles and once a green Milo tin. Slowly their wings faded and turned into mellow dust, collecting mites like unwelcome strangers into a dark world. Papa, I remember the orange and brown bed cover, prickly to the touch, my green pinafore and sunflower curtains, Akong standing in his white shorts wondering where you are. It has been 40 years since you left me, a child crying by the shattering sea. I fear I have never recovered. I think I've outstayed my time. Unlike you, there is no more mourning. There is no more darkening of the sky, of the liver, throat, and spleen, of in-between colored boats that ferry nightly metaphors to sweet, darling madness. Papa, the birds and cicadas are asleep. The floods are gone, but the butterflies, they still lie awake in the garden. I'd like to read a poem in Malay. I don't normally write in Malay, I sometimes do, and this was an occasion that prescribed it. This is a love poem. Untuk dia. Saya telah diberi izin untuk sayang kamu. Tapi inilah takdir dosa aku. Mungkin aku terlalu baik, mungkin aku terlalu bisa, mungkin aku perempuan aja. Tapi biar aku menolak dusta yang aku telah dipersembahkan kamu. Mungkin aku salah percaya kepada manusia yang belum menjadi manusia. Thank you. Thank you.
Nice to meet you. Yeah. Thank you for being here. Yeah. I'm going to read the part of my short story in Korean. 잘못 태어난 아이들. 사춘기 때 비는 늘 자신이 실수로 태어난 아이라고 농담을 하곤 했다. 우리 아버지한테 5,000원이 없거나 수술비 5만 원이 있거나 둘 중 하나였으면 난 태어나지도 않았을 거야. 하지만 비의 사연은 얘기할 때마다 바뀌었다. 사실 아버지가 엄마한테 수술비를 마련해 주긴 했대. 그런데 엄마가 병원에 가려고 상가 앞을 지나가는데 쇼윈도에 너무나 마음에 드는 구슬백이 있지 않았겠어? 엄마는 냉큼 수술비로 그 백을 사버렸어. 우리 엄마는 나중 일은 나중에 생각하자 이런 식이거든. 안 그랬으면 내가 만들어지지도 않았겠지. 어쨌든 그렇게 해서 내가 태어났다니까. 난 구슬백하고 경쟁해서 졌기 때문에 태어난 인생이야. 비는 어떤 날은 구슬백이 아니라 주름치마였다거나 진주반지였다고 말을 바꿔가며 너스레를 떨었다. 자기의 태어남에 대해 그렇게 농담할 수 있는 B가 나는 부러웠다. Could you read for me?
Can you come up? Sonia Lee from the Asian Division will read the story.
Children born by mistake. Back when I was a kid, B used to be joked that his birth was accident. I would never have been born if one, my dad didn't have 5,000 won for a motel room or two, if he did have a 50,000 won for abortion. But B, story changed each time he told it. Actually, my dad did give me a mom money for abortion, but on the way to the clinic, she was passing in front of a shop where a beaded purse in the window caught her eye. My mom blew all the money for the abortion on the purse. Her motto for everything is, I will deal with it later. That was her style. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. Anyway, that's how I was born. I completed against the beaded purse and lost, and that's how my life began. Go on. Go on. The time. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Chen Li. I come from Taiwan and I write in Chinese. I've written and published a book called Microcosmos, containing 200 three-line poems. Here are 10 of them. I will read the English translation done by my wife first, then read the original Chinese ones. Microcosmos. I wait and long for you. A turning die in the empty bowl of night, attempting to create the seventh side. 我等候，我渴望你。一粒骰子在夜的空碗里，企图转出第七面。 a great event on the desolate winter day. Earwax drops on the desk. 寂寥冬日里的重大事件，一块儿时掉落在书桌上。Multiplication table for kids of clouds and fog. Mountain times mountains equals trees. Mountain times trees equals me. Mountains times me equals nothingness. 云雾小孩的99乘法表，3乘3等于树，3乘树等于我，3乘我等于虚无。All the sorrow of night will be turned into golden years of rice by daylight, waiting to be reaped by another sorrowful night. 所有夜晚的忧伤都要在白日转成金黄的稻穗，等候另一个忧伤的夜晚收割。Having constantly broken world records, a lonely shot putter throw his head out in one put. 在不断打破世界纪录之后，我们孤寂的铅球选手一举把他的头直出去。The white skin turns a moor into an isle. I miss the glistening vast ocean inside your clothes. 一颗至阴肉体的白，成为一座岛。我想念你衣服里波光万顷的海。Amour or no more? I say amour. You say no more. I say no more, no more, no more. You say amour, amour, no more. 爱或者爱，我说爱，你说爱，我说爱爱爱，你说爱爱爱。The story of marriage, a closet of loneliness plus a closet of loneliness equals a closet of loneliness. 婚姻物语，一个衣柜的寂寞加一个衣柜的寂寞等于一个衣柜的寂寞。Chirping competition. 0-year-old aged cicadas teach 0-year-old baby cicadas to sing Happy Birthday. 真名0岁的老蝉教0岁的幼蝉唱生日快乐。Great fleeting, let me hide inside you, like water melting in water, seen by the world, found by no one. 大逃亡，让我藏身在你里面，像水溶于水，被全世界看见，但没有人发现。Thank you.
Thank you to our authors for their readings and their rhythm. It was very helpful for me to hear all of that. Thank you. I now have some questions for you all, and some of the questions have been asked before. The first one will be to talk about some of the writers who have influenced you and how. And then in the second question, it'll be to talk about what the literary scene is like in your country and how are you a part of that. I'll start on this side and then I'll start on the other side. So Binayak, can you first talk about the writers who have influenced you?
The anxiety of influence. I have thought about it many a times, and the fact which I want to state is, I would just broaden it and then shorten it, that influence cannot be from one side only. When I came to USA, before that, and I was talking with certain people here, I was asking Hugh, I was asking Merrill at times. I had some invitations. I had an invitation from Alabama, and I have never heard. And then I suddenly remembered, oh, that's the Harper Lee country. Oh, To Kill a Mockingbird, I have to go there. San Francisco. Oh, since I am a student of English literature, I teach English in a college. So I thought, oh, San Francisco, California Ranch, it must be East of Eden, or The Grapes of Wrath, go there. Chicago, Hemingway. So I have Tennessee Williams, must be someone of Tennessee. And Eugene O'Neill, where was he? UNESCO, where was he? Saul Bellow, Faulkner, the southern part. No. So in this way, America was living in my mind long before I came to USA through its literature. But the moment I go back and I share the experience, what I find is that the influence, I went to a college, I met some young talented guys who said to me that you know so much. I do not know so much, but to them it seemed we know at least something of the American literature. People like us who have studied English literature know quite a bit, have been taught like that. But they said that we don't know the approach of how a South Asian or an Indian gets under the skin of his story or his poems or her poems exactly. So I have been influenced by a lot of writers, but I would like to name, the names, I just took the names of American authors, I will take names of others also, but there are certain names which I believe I have been strongly influenced by. Rabindranath Tagore, Bibhuti Banerjee, Manik Banerjee, whom I am sure one day Chris asked me the question, Chris Merrill, and I said that I really do believe that it's the duty of the entire world to read in translations. There is something in South Asian literature, which, if it comes to you in proper translation, can sit beside the very best in world literature. And only for the fact that Nobel Prize has certain Eurocentric bias, or it seems to be such, but if we can break that jinx and we can have something, I have often approached, since I am a teacher of English, I have often translated American poems long before coming to USA, but I feel that there's a sense among the young poets in the Indian subcontinent that we are not being read, or we are not being recognized, we are not able to make our voices heard. So the anxiety of influence for me lies here. I am influenced by writers, Indian writers, not only in my language, by U.R. Anantamurthy, by M.T. Vasudevan Nair, by Premchand, who wrote in Malayalam or Kannada or Hindi, who I think can ably represent Indian literature, South Asian literature in the world scene. And just as I am conversant with the American authors, maybe there's a shortfall. I do not know Indian authors of other languages that much. And when I get influenced by them, I understand that this circle of influence is complete. So I have been influenced, and at the same time, while getting influenced, I also want this influence to be a two-way story. How it can happen, I have only a vague idea. There can be translation workshops, there can be lots of things, but I think the proper message of IWP, that this reaching out, that the entire literary world is a home for all of us, can reach all of us when there will be a two-way traffic. The writings of India and South Asian literature particularly can reach the American audience more. Just as we are enthralled and enkindled by the American literature, the other way should also happen sooner rather than later. I think so. Thank you.
I grew up in a British colony, ex-British colony, so I spoke English as my first language. My parents were teachers. My parents had an extensive library, so I read everything from Dickens to
books about invertebrates and science and geology. My father was interested in both his right brain and his left brain. He was an artist and a scientist. And then slowly, when I started becoming very interested in poetry, I took English literature in high school. One of my great influences was an Irish Lasallian brother called Brother Vincent, who introduced me to also the classics, Dickens, George Eliot, Austen, Shakespeare, of course, Virginia Woolf. So, you know, and then I studied in Canada, and I started reading the Canadian poets, the American poets, Plath, Glick, the Russian poets, Akhmatova, Seva. So my influences are huge, and now that I'm working in fiction, it's just becoming more and more diverse, I suppose. But I'm also very influenced by the myths and legends that are so pervasive in Malaysia and in Asia and the part of the world. I'm half Chinese, so my mother forced me to read a lot of Chinese myths and legends when I was a child. This also influenced me. We have a lot of hikayats and pantuns, Malay myth and literature and magic also is very, very significant in my work. We have a profound belief in the spirit world, so it's oral tradition, it's what happens around you, things you hear every day, and of course, what is in the physical and the invisible world. So these are very, very much part of my influences.
Thank you.
So,
Sonia, will you read?
yeah, I need help.
Why don't you come up here? Go ahead. Use the podium. That's fine.
By the way, the story she read it today, she brought extra copy for us. So if you can help from the back, it's written in English, so you can.
Thank you.
So admire all the writers that wasn't anyone who I particularly wants to be like. The moment that I read Milan Kundera was the moment I felt like, oh, so this is how I can write. There was a point where I realized that my life, beginning from my mid-30s onward, was a form of acting. After that point, I began writing with the idea that I was interrogating myself. The literary attitude that I pursue matched up with the penetrating insight in Milan's Kundera's worldview, as well as the biting prose and humor he used to express that sight. After I became a writer myself, I became influenced by a variety of writers. From Julian Barnes, I learned that lively imagination can only originate in knowledge. From Patrick Modiano, I learned that we can see the velocity of life in a way things disappear into nothingness. But of course, the writers who have influenced me the most are those who are from the country that I live in, my contemporaries in Korea, in other words, my colleagues.
Thank you. Thank you. Chen Li.
When I was a college student, I started to read works of foreign writers in the original or in translation, including those of William Butler Yeats, T.S. Eliot, Leek, Baudelaire, Rimbaud, and some Japanese haiku poets. Since my graduation from university, I, with my wife, have translated into Chinese many poems of foreign poets, such as Sylvia Plath, Ted Hughes, Philip Larkin, Seamus Heaney, Nelly Sachs, Baye Holt, Paz Neruda, Szymborska. They all have had influence on me. Among them, Neruda's influence seems the most obvious because I have translated at least 4 books of his poems into Chinese. Writers in Taiwan have a subtle perception of the beauty of the Chinese language, different from what writers in mainland China have. Being an island occupied and ruled by different countries and regimes, Taiwan has gradually transformed itself into a land open to varieties of cultures. The languages used by people on Taiwan contains diverse elements: Taiwanese, the Hakka dialect, indigenous languages, Japanese, English, etc. Diversity of languages, lifestyles, and cultures have resulted in new sensibility, new interest, and new vitality, from which come new forms, skills, and subject matters in writing. Writing of homosexuality or feminism, indigenous writers combining their mother tongues with the Chinese languages. All these are comparatively seldom found in mainland China. Some scholars regard me as one of the most innovative and exciting poets writing in Chinese today. I don't know if I am, but I try my best to combine in my poetry the elements of Western modernism and postmodernism with the merits of Oriental poetics and the Chinese language. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question has to do with what is the literary scene in your country right now, and how are you a part of that? Bernice, would you like to start?
Malaysia is at a point of major transition right now. We are dealing with a very corrupt authoritarian government, so I think the politics definitely affects the kind of freedoms of expression that we have. In spite of all this, it's a very, very exciting time. Publishing is booming. My publisher is recently won the Publisher of the Year at the London Book Fair, so it's a very, very vibrant, interesting time. In spite of, again, these restriction of freedoms, people are writing, and I think it's the best time to be an artist in Malaysia right now, because we have to keep fighting back. We have to keep making art. In terms of the global literary scene, writers like Tash Au and Tan Tuan Eng have also made significant leaps and bounds. Both have been longlisted, and then Tuan Eng was subsequently shortlisted for the Booker Prize and then won the Man Asian Prize. So I think it's a very, like I said, it's a very exciting time for us, not just in the English language, but also in Bahasa Malaysia or in Malay, because there's now new genres that are coming up, genres that deal with magic realism and noir. So again, we're dealing with all the restrictions that we have a Sedition Act, and if somebody finds offense with your work, you can be questioned for many hours and subsequently jailed, arrested, blah, blah, blah. So we are being very creative, and I think there's a certain kind of bravery that is happening right now. A lot of young people are making very, very interesting art, and I hope that continues.
Thank you. That's very interesting to know that. I have many questions. Do you have anything else? Oh, there you are.
As everyone knows, literature reflects its respective society. Up until now, Korean literature has struggled against the ideology of colonization, war, and dictatorship, and in a way, that has been the literary material and homework for Korean writers. But following democratization in the 90s, literature moved inward and focused on the interiority of the individual. That was when I became a writer. Today, diversity defines Korean literature. Korea is a country that moves incredibly quickly, so if you were to do a cross-section of the time in Korea, you would see that so many different things are caught up together in one massive flow. The colonial generalization characterized by the traditional and Confucian worldview and mid-20th century generation who developed the country economically after war, and generation of intellectuals who fought military dictatorship, and the sensitive yet consumptive young generation faced with unemployment. These different generations are all active on the ground together. Furthermore, Korea was the first country to develop the metal movable type system for printing in 1377. World literature was introduced quickly in the country through the development of the printing, and the country continued to foster a strong environment for reading. That is also why writers do not confine their identity according to religion or nation. In reality, there are no real trends or commonalities across Korean novels. Even if any of you have read something written by a Korean writer, that doesn't mean that you read a Korean novel, you just read a novel. In Korea, they call me a writer who wears a cynical smile and spew of venom. That is because I have to look at her more carefully when she has that cynical smile. That is because I was sick and tired of the ideology that past generations fought so hard for and protected. I broke free of this ideology and wrote a novel that said, "Let me become me." Confucian value, nationalism, and Korean democracy keeps humans in boxes, and I wanted to cut myself out. The first line in my first novel was, after I was 12, there was no need for me to grow any further. However, I simply thought that Korean society, which prides itself on the unity of its people, is too exclusivist and far too caught up in the bloodlines and the regionalism. My cold smile and the venomous words merely make up the base position from which I can maintain critical distance. It is not any sort of the pessimism. I actually think that my novels are quite warm. One cannot write a novel without care and affection for other people, and from that perspective, I think that all novelists are humanists.
Thank you. Cold smile? Okay.
Maybe I can say something about the difference between modern poetry in mainland China and that in Taiwan. Poets of mainland China seems to like using big and heavy words to deal with themes of patriotism, mankind, or history. Poets in Taiwan focus more on how to express their feelings and thought with variety and originality than on what profound messages to convey. They write about ordinary people and simple life, but through humor, wit, and exquisite uses of words, readers feel their present and aesthetic wisdom. In my opinion, exquisiteness means the subtle changes and the display of sounds, shapes, postures. Poetry deals with petty things and serious things in life, but you don't have to use big, heavy words to handle serious things. The Polish poet Szymborska is a good example of this. She's good at using simple words and ordinary daily incidents to present things with profound meaning.
There is an Indian poet called Sumatindra Nadig who had 2 lines. I have always got 0 in maths. Who told after getting a prize, I have always got 0 in maths, and giving exams after exams after exams, I have got you. And his wife thought he was talking about her, but he was talking about the prize. So, about the literary scene in India, as much as I know, because India is a continent, to quote Milan Kundera, it's much laughter and less forgetting, and at times it's less laughter and much forgetting. much forgetting because the vernacular market is shrinking. But actual Indian writing is in vernacular languages. Because my problem with Indian English writings, except a few exceptions, is that they sell India as an exotica. Mostly. India is a tourist spot, a subject where the country is sold, where Jaipur is sold, it's the pink city is sold, but not the desert is sold. So this is the problem with most Indian English writings, and the vernacular writings, they don't have a market because there is not very much good translations. And another thing, which is India is a country of huge population, so no matter how little section of the society, how little a section of the society buys books, it gets multiplied. But the problem started in India. We had a very free culture. In India, we had this chance of this democratic view of presenting whatever we wrote. And it has been going on for almost 100 years, even when the British ruled us. But the problem started when once, due to some external pressure or due to something, the Indian government first did the blunder of banning a book. They banned Satanic Verses by Salman Rushdie. And that opened the Pandora's box. Now, any book which comes out with anything controversial, a section of the society jumps up and shows that precedence and asks it to be banned. So this banning culture was never there in the Indian literary scene. It started 20 years back with the banning of this single book, and unless this ban is lifted, I think this demands for more and more banning from every section of the society will go on, and this is a problem which we have to face, and we are fighting against it. We, as part of, I'm a member of the Shakespeare Society, and I'm also part of the Indian literary societies, and so we are trying to translate Indian writings from Indian languages. Otherwise, since English has become the link language in India, what happens that when it's translated from English to another Indian language, the meaning gets somewhat lost. So we are trying that so that Indian writing gets translated into Indian languages directly, and we also consider English as one of the Indian languages, because Indian English is very much different from what it should be, what it is in America or United Kingdom. So it's not all gloom, but it's not also all boom also. We are marginalized, but we are not extinct, and in India, audiovisual tyranny is at its best. So we hope that it will come down from its zenith, and even if it doesn't touch its nadir, sometimes the print media will reoccupy its position, and there are so many languages. I'm just hoping, but because in India there's also a fight between languages. Bengali is the only Indian language which has received the Nobel Prize. Rabindranath Tagore was the first Asian to receive the Nobel Prize. No other Indian languages have received that. Again, Hindi is the language spoken by most people. But this numerical game plus this superiority, everyone thinks his or her mother tongue to be superior. It's very natural. So this continues. We have to strike a balance between so many languages, and most Indians, they know 2 or 3 languages. They can speak in that. So by maintaining this critical balance, we are trying to present anthologies. We are trying to bring at least 4, 5, 6 Indian languages into the forefront, whereby the world knows the Indian literature, which is not only the literature of a country, but because of so many languages, and publishers are also trying it to have both versions, vernacular version and English version, and we are trying to showcase India, the real Indian literature, whereby the world knows India as it is, not just as a country, but as a continent of multiple voices.
I want to thank the authors for coming and sharing their thoughts with us. I think there's some similar themes that run with all of the authors. I think of self-empowerment, individuality, struggle against the various systems that exist in their country, but also being open to variety and influence from both sides and not just one side. So thank you all. I appreciate your coming
I
today.
would just add one comment to this.
then
Yes,
I'll thank
because
you
of
all.
systems, I often think we often protest as writers. We seem it our birthright to protest against systems and all this power. But I have often been enchanted by these words of Paul Valéry that power without abuse loses its charm. So as writers, we have the power, particularly when I write fictions, I have that power to do anything and everything with my characters. So if I can abuse my power as a writer, why not the system? I think at times. But we all protest against systems and fight for democracy. Thank you so much.
Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Teru Spiegel from the European Division. It's my pleasure to introduce our distinguished authors today. From left to right, we have Franca Treur. She won the 2010 Selexis Debut Prize for her novel, Confetti on the Threshing Floor. And by the way, I'm going to give all these titles in English because there's no point in my murdering anybody else's language up here. So her book will be released as a feature-length film this fall, and her second novel, The Roommates, came out earlier this year. Franca contributes stories, columns, and essays to a number of newspapers, magazines, and the radio. Laurynas Katkus is the author of the novel Moving Shadows, the essay collection The Basement, and the poetry collections Voices, Notes, Diving Lessons, and Behind 7 Streets. His writing has been widely translated, appearing in New European Poets, an anthology, Absinthe, The Drunken Boat, and elsewhere. He translates from the English, German, and Spanish. Gerõur Kristný is the author of 5 poetry collections, 2 novels, 9 books for children, a travelogue, and 1 biography. Widely awarded, her work has been translated into 21 languages. In 2011, the musical The Ball at Bessastaðir, based on her fiction, was staged at Iceland's National Theatre. Gerõur has worked in broadcasting and is the former editor-in-chief of a literary monthly. Auguste Corteau is the author of 14 novels, among them Shameless Suicides, The Obliteration of Nikos, 16, and The Book of Catherine, and the short story collection, The Man Who Ate Too Much. He's also won Greek National Book Award for Children's Literature and an Ibby Prize for Best Children's Novel. Corteau has translated over 30 titles, including the work of Apollinaire, Faulkner, Salinger, Updike, and Banville. He writes primarily in English and also teaches creative writing and has taught himself to play the piano. That was in his bio. Yeah. So if I can have you come in here to read Franca first. Thank you. I want to come up to the lectern. Yeah. And these move
very Okay, I'm reading a part in Dutch. It's about a couple that goes to another couple for a visit because they had just twins, so 2 little babies, and they're going to see them. Op de drempel neem ik nog even een diepe teug lucht. Ik hou niet zo van de geur van andermans huizen. Binnen zijn de gordijnen half dicht. We staren een tijdje in het donker om wat te wennen aan de bijna sacrale schemer die er hangt. Wauw, zeggen we. Ze hebben er echt wat van gemaakt. Een houten vloer, een lange tafel met op de hoek een aankleedkussen, lichtgele crèmetubus, een stapeltje pampers. Er zijn 2 grote gatenplanten, aan de muur hangt ingelijste kunst. 1 wand is tot de nok gevuld met boeken. In zijn vrije tijd pakt Freddy graag een keer een goed boek. Op de onderste rij staan 25 delen Winkler Prins. En dan, achter ons, in de beige zithoek bij het zachtgele schijnsel van een schemerlampje, zit vol glans en glimlach Caro met een baby. Ik had graag nog wat naar haar gekeken, maar ze legt het kind voorzichtig naast zich neer op de bank, het spuugdoekje erbovenop, en staat op om ons te begroeten. Ze drukt Erik tegen zich aan en zoent hem alsof hij behouden terug is gekeerd van de grote vaart. Freddy is een beetje pappig geworden, maar Caro ziet er heel gezond en blozend uit. Ze heeft een vreemd luchtje bij zich, iets zuurs. Misschien wast ze zich niet meer zo goed. Misschien heeft ze andere dingen aan haar hoofd dan zichzelf af te gaan zitten sponsen. Does anyone understand Dutch, actually? Not really? So I will stop here and I will read the same part in English then. It's of my second novel. And then, behind us, in the pale yellow glow of a standard lamp, there's Caro, sitting in a beige lounge holding a baby. She's radiant, smiling. I would gladly have kept on looking, but she gingerly puts the child down next to her on the couch, lays the bib on top, and gets up to greet us. Oh. She presses Erik to her and kisses him as if he's returned safe and sound from an ocean voyage. Freddie has grown a little pudgy, but Caro is rosy-cheeked, the picture of health. She has a strange odor about her, a hint of soreness. Perhaps she's not washing herself too thoroughly these days. Perhaps she's got more on her mind than sponging herself down all day. They inform us that they have 2 bathrooms, one just upstairs and one on the second floor. They just moved in a new house. The second floor is still completely empty. They don't even know what they do with it yet. A studio for Caro, perhaps. But right now there simply aren't enough hours in the day. Caro decides it's time for us to devote some attention to the babies. One is upstairs in his cot, the other won't sleep. The infant insomniac stared at me blankly. Apart from a shiny outbreak of blackheads, he's a fine specimen. He has Caro's forehead, which is fortunate. Freddie's forehead doesn't have the customary dome of an awning. His is more of a sloping sunscreen, like in those pictures of prehistoric people. This baby is blessed with an awning. He looks good, Erik nods. Well done. Doesn't he just, says Caro. Is the other one his spitting image, I ask. No, that's not the case. They are not identical. The parents wouldn't have it any other way. You have to see them as 2 separate individuals, not as more of the same. Thank you.
Labadiana, hello everybody. I'm excited to read in the largest library of the world, and I'm going to read a couple of poems. And the first one is, I cannot help but starting with one poem which is about another national library just in Vilnius, and it is called, I'm not making it up, On the 6th Floor. On the 6th floor, Mažvydas Library. An elevator murmuring quietly lifts us into a sky of books. Eyes closed, you twist your hair around your finger. Slumber is a soft and warm cocoon. It will tear when you step into the labyrinth of shelves, when you hang your ID around your neck. In the nearby prison's yellow cages, they read the script another way, with a whole body. On Iron Wolf Street, the cars race, competing towards success. But here, only twilight, hours on end, twilight. At lunch, you'll drink juice from the wine glass, the pungence sticking to the corner of your lips. You'll wander down the aisles, not even searching for the beginning or the end of letters. As if saying goodbye, you'll touch the spines of the books. For you know how one waits for a sign, just a stirring, how on understanding everything shines, how the shelves are endless. The door opens onto the dim corridor, but my electricity has grazed your hair. Not moving, not paying any attention, you stand and drink your image, which duplicates itself in the elevator's mirrors. Now, just to get you the impression of what we were doing in Iowa, among other things, I will read a poem which I gave to translate for a translation workshop in the university. And there were like 8 students doing different versions, so I just picked one. I will first read it in Lithuanian and then the translation. It's about a Skype talk. Does anybody understand Lithuanian here? No. Well, so I can now just say anything. I mean, just swear the whole
being
time.
Taped.
Okay, no. So then, yeah. Right. Offline. Atpažįstu tave visur, metro tunelio šešėliuose, svetimos palaidinės baltume, atsisveikinimo bučinį, dviratį minančios nefertitės kaklo linkyje. Tavo tramdyta ašara, tas jaudrumas, nieko negaliu su savim padaryti. Bėga mano alkūnė, keistas jausmas. Nukrinta ant žemėlapio kelių ir ribuliuoja lygumos nuo Suvalkijos iki Oderio, kol neužsnūstų kietoji autobuso kėdėjai. Kaip kempė ant medžio kamieno, šitiek amžių praleidau su tavim 7 metus, vis trumpiau žiūrėdamas, vis paprasčiau galvodamas. Bet išgirdus kompiuteryje šnarant tavo žemą balsą, pertemptoj nugaroj vėl ima cirkuliuoti syvai. Nemokamas pokalbis, metai po metų, kurio nutilėjimu neperrektų sausakimši šitos šalies stadionai. Alsi kibirkštis į tolimą tamsą, kai prabudintas gaudžiančių varpų aklai grabinėjos aplinkui. Metai po metų saldesnės prisirpsta tavo krūtys, vis saldesnės, kai ne. I recognize you everywhere in the shadows of the metro tunnel, in the whiteness of tourist blouses, in the farewell kiss, in the slope of Pharaoh's neck on a bicycle. The tear which you have been trying to suppress, this tenderness I cannot do anything with myself, runs down my elbow, a strange feeling, as it falls to my lap, to land on the highway map, and the paper planes shiver until I doze on the hard seat of the bus. Moss or the trunk of the tree, I feel I've grown on you for ages in only 7 years, and in that time I looked up more and more briefly, my thoughts whittled down to white. But when I hear in the computer the swish of your low voice, in my overstretched back the juices start circulating again. This rambling talk, year after year, in which pauses, silences, shout even louder than the cramped stadiums of this country. Dial up spark in distant darkness, when woken by the droning chime, I blindly grope around me. Year after year, your breasts grow sweeter, ripe enough to off. And the last thing, it's about life. And so I live with cobwebs and ficuses, dictionaries, comic strips, and a heart which taps at the outskirts of night. I live with parcels and emails, Prussia and Žvėrynas, moonshine and wine. When the air gets colder, the breathing slower. In dreams, I talk with statues and poets whom I like and whom I cannot stand, clearly pronouncing the consonants. I cut my nails, repair the shower, confess and overlook in silence, drive the car, because nobody suggested I do so. Outside in patches of melting snow, I observe a hare sitting in a corpse and let him into my consciousness. I jump, strike something, I freeze. how humid is all around, how steamy above the earth. Covered with space, rarely seen, listening to ever stronger beat of my heart. Thank you.
Hello. Crime fiction has been very popular in Scandinavia and Northern Europe for years, and of course here in America. You might have heard of Scandinavian fiction writers like Henning Mankell, Jo Nesbø, and our most famous writer is Arnaldur Indriðason, which can be bought here in America and all around the world. I thought it was time to write a Scandinavian crime poem. My 6th poetry book was published just a few weeks ago while I was still in Iowa. I was a journalist for years. I met a murderer who happened to have killed his wife, and I interviewed him, and I couldn't forget his story. So I decided to write Drápa. I'm going to read the beginning of it so that you can hear my language. It's called Icelandic. We are 300,000 Icelanders that live in this isolated island in the Atlantic Ocean, and this is what our language sounds like. Drápa. Stjörnur hafa fallið úr festingunni, sáldrast yfir götur. Brotin stingast eins og hnífsoddar upp úr mjöllinni. Flugvél brýst út úr skýjunum, strýkst við marglit þökin í miðbænum. Í Reykjavík fellur nóttin með kvini, eins og öxi. Það var vetur, kuldinn lagði lófa yfir heiminn, skýin héngu grá eins og dúfurnar, fiðraðar ufsagrílur sem sváfu undir þakskeggjum. Ég leið í líki hunds, golan strauk snöggan feld, hvíldi hönd á kolli mínum, kettir hurfu inn í runna, hentust bak við tunnur. And since Drápa hasn't been translated yet, I'm going to read a few poems in English. Translated by Vicky Kripp. Patriotic poem. The cold makes me a lair from fair places, a pillow of downy drift under my head, a blanket of snow to swaddle me in. I'd lay my ear to the cracking of the ice in the hope of hearing it retreat. If I didn't know, I'd be frozen fast. The ice lets no one go. My country, a spread deathbed, my initials stitched in the icy linen. New Year's morning. The only ones to have survived the night are a Japanese family who have switched off the neon signs in their heads and made do with the light over the mountains. When the boy breaks the ice film on the lake with his toe, a low crack sounds like the snap of a wing. He catches up with his parents on the bridge where they quicken their pace. They mean to be safe indoors before darkness reimposes its curfew. I once had a rather difficult neighbor. He was living under my apartment, and he threw parties, noisy parties, and he was selling drugs. I did not like him. He did not like me. And I started thinking about my favorite neighbor in the whole wide world, who on earth that could be. And I decided to write a poem about that person. Anne Frank. By day there is not a peep from Anne, who lives in widowhood overhead, except when she dozes off over her diary, drops it on the floor. Otherwise, not a peep. It's another matter at night when there is all hell of a hubbub. Anne's friends pound up the stairs, hollering their hellos, and crack open a feast. Some with a bottle of buttermilk, others nursing eggs. Towards dawn, the neighbors are fed up of fiddles and folk songs. The guests depart in haste, melting into the walls. When the police force the door, Anne sits at the kitchen table, writing. My husband's family comes from the countryside, and my last poem is about true events from that farm. Triumph. The farmer drives gloating through the district, vixen dead on the hood. He laid shears to her lair in his jeep, so the animal smelt the stench of petrol, not man. No one mentions Achilles or Hector, and I know how to hold my tongue.
Hello, I'm Auguste Corteau, and the possibility of someone actually speaking Greek here, other than me being equal to someone having moussaka in their tote bag, I will spare you the sound of my mother tongue. While in Iowa, while receiving the blessings of the IWP, I wrote a short novel called My Best Friend Can't See Me. It tells the story of Puppy, a seeing-eye dog, whose best friend, Harry, the blind 8-year-old Harry, was killed in a hidden run a few years ago. It's a first-person narrative. I'm going to read you the start of first 2 pages of this new novel. Today I brought my favorite toy with me. It actually used to belong to Harry, but it got passed down to me when he outgrew it, sort of like an older brother's hand-me-downs. It's a Donald Duck squeaky doll, and though I've been gnawing at it for so long it has been suffused with my own doggy smell, if I keep my snout pressed against it long enough and really concentrate, I think I can still detect a whiff of Harry's scent. A mixture of fruity bubble bath and freshly laundered clothes, cinnamon chewing gum and a sweet milky sweat, which to this day remains my favorite smell in the whole wide world. I'm not really allowed in this place, and I honestly think people would be better off not coming here either. All this place does is make them sad. From where I'm standing, I can hear 8 different men and women crying, some of them so hard they're gasping for breath. I feel sorry for them, though no one's pain affects me as deeply and upsettingly as mother's. She might not be crying or even breathing heavily, but still her pain is like a wall through which I can barely see or feel her. We come here every week, and on a few occasions people have objected to my presence, but then Father explained to them my role in Harry's life and how I'm actually the first to run to the car when I sense that one of these outings is imminent. And after that they looked at me in a different way, and their coolness melted into a silent, apologetic awkwardness. And there's a priest who definitely owns a dog himself. He smells of it intensely, and his black habit is speckled with short white hairs, who always stops to pet me and have a quiet word with Father, though not with Mother, never with Mother. She's stopped talking to pretty much anyone for a while now, and even when she does, her voice has a flat, distant sound to it, as if it's an old recording of a person speaking who's no longer alive. While Father and I stand a few feet back, he having a furtive smoke, I with Donald firmly clutched in my jaws, she's kneeling on the small patch of grass around the base of the stone and pulling out the weeds. Looking at her, I remember the time when she'd stooped down like this to pick up a stick and throw it for me to fetch. Often, especially when we were out in a big park or rather outdoorsy place where there was no danger of speeding cars, with Harry following, laughing at my heels, guided by the sound of my joyful barking. Those were the days. I wish someone would play fetch with me, but I know better than to get my hopes up that it will ever happen again. I mean, Father still talks to me every now and then and takes me out for my 3 daily walks, and on occasion, while watching one of his favorite shows on TV, he may stroke my head in an absent-minded sort of way, but that's as far as his involvement with me goes. Not that I begrudge him. The poor man does the best he can with his depleted life force. You can't get blood from a stone, humans say. Look at what happened to poor Mother. You can't get anything from her anymore. It's like she's turned to stone altogether. When she's done with her weeding and step back to assess the result, I make my slow, timid way to the spot where the flagstone ends and drop squeaky old Donald on the grass. I don't really know why I just did this. Certainly Harry doesn't know it's there, the same way he can't feel anything at all. But it felt like the proper thing to do. I've seen people leave small items, gifts, like this in front of their loved ones' stones. Sometimes it's a photo, sometimes an object that used to belong to the person resting forever under the ground. One time I even saw an old Mexican woman leave a plate of chili con carne in front of a grave decorated with a statue of an angel. And mouth-wateringly tempting though it looked and smelled, I knew I shouldn't touch it, for even though no one was going to eat it, it wasn't meant for me. So now I brought a doll that used to belong to the both of us, one of the few remaining connections with my beloved Harry, through whose faint smell of earlier, happier times I can almost delude myself into believing I can pick up his smell, even after all this time, through the marble and the soil and the wood and over the smell of all the rest of the bodies slowly turning into a fetid, formless mulch in their burial spots. Two things happen at once the moment Donald touches the grass. Father takes a short, sharp breath and quickly covers his mouth with his hand to hide the sound of his suddenly clogged nose. And Mother says, "You're such a good dog, puppy," in a voice so shaky and strange it's nearly unrecognizable, similar to the croak of her own grandmother as she lay, fragile and wasted away on her deathbed a few years back. I remember thinking at the time, so that's how being filled with death makes you sound. And hearing now the same hoarseness in Mother's voice scares and saddens me. But I cannot enjoy the compliment and be filled by pride as I used to back when kind words still mattered. I'll always be grateful to Mother and Father for giving me life, but nowadays it's almost as hard for me to feel actual joy as it is for them, because my sole purpose in life, my one true source of happiness, were taken from me, never to return. Yet this is not a story of loss. It is a tale of love for my precious one and only Harry, the best friend a dog could ever have.
Well, that was some powerful reading here. I think we should have a moment of silence now. We're going to move on to the question that has been asked here before today, which is, who are some of the writers who influenced you and how? And are you ready to go ahead?
There's a host of names I could think of, but I'm going to pick three of them. Marcel Proust, Vladimir Nabokov, and J.D. Salinger. And the thing that has been so influential in their writings for me is their fearlessness in stretching the medium of writing, of novel writing, of never being afraid of sounding too verbose or too complicated or too demanding, and the fact of not just being terrific storytellers, but through their work approaching the essence of humanity with a great deal of love, be it through the narrator's mother in La Recherche, or Humbert, that monster whom we get to love so deeply and feel for and sympathize with, or of course the Glass family, Franny and Zooey, all those wonderful neurotics of Salinger's. Yes, these three have been the greatest, wielded the greatest influence of my writing because they're fearless.
Thank you, Auguste. Gerõur?
I fell in love with books because I read wonderful children's literature. For example, books by Astrid Lindgren, who was from Sweden, and wrote about, for example, Pippi Longstocking, that might have been translated into English.
Yes. It's wonderful.
Absolutely.
Yes, it is. Yeah, so I really admired children's books authors. And when I became a teenager, I became a snob, and I decided to read authors that had gotten the Nobel Prize, just so that I could learn something from them. So Halldór Laxness, an Icelandic Nobel Prizer who got the prize in 1955, he was an obvious choice, and I read him, and Selma Lagerlöf, who came from Sweden. And I just was more interested in people that came from Northern Europe. And yes, if there is a lot of snow in books, I prefer them more than other kind of literature. So Tsvetsayeva was, yeah, she's good. She's okay. There's some snow and cold in her books. And Bukowski, because he's so unhappy. Coming from Scandinavia, you can't be too happy, you know. That's not how life is up there. So, yeah, and yes, that's maybe pretty much it. And the old Nordic mythology, you might have heard about Thor, for example, who has made it big in Hollywood now. We are very proud of him. And yes, and I keep using those old Nordic mythology as a well that I can always dig into. And my prize-winning poetry book, Bloodhoof, who got the Icelandic Literature Prize in 2010, is a retelling of one of those mythologies. They're dark, those mythologies, and there's a lot of snow in them, so it's okay. They qualify.
Okay. Thank you, Laurynas.
Well, for me, it's very difficult to talk about influences, because I think I'm a person who gets influenced all the time, and every book I read, or even a notice on a milk thing, milk card, or graffiti in a street, that can be of influence too. And sometimes I'm also myself surprised. I'm surprised to see how it then reflects and reverberates in my writings, the things which I've I thought I've forgotten, but suddenly they come up back when I'm writing. But there is one figure which I think influenced me deeply. It's a Lithuanian poet, Alfonsas Nyka. I have worked on him a lot, and he actually lives still. He still lives, and he lives nearby in Baltimore. And he's considered to be one of the greatest 20th century Lithuanian poets. And he worked all his time in a library. So he's you could call him a kind of Lithuanian Borges, He's a very learned person and an incredible horizons, intellectual horizons, but at the same time very sensual and very full of images. Another, I think for Lithuanians, this century has been a century of exiles, both physical and mental, and that's why his poetry resonates so powerfully, not only with me, but with a lot of Lithuanian poets and writers. And it's just maybe now we are returning back from this exile. And the last thing I wanted to tell about him is that the library he worked all the time is a Congress library. He worked here for, 40, 50 years.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. We have to look into that. All right, Franca.
Yeah. For me, the same as for Laurynas. Many writers are inspiring me. I have, of course, my favorites, which are, for example, Margaret Atwood from Canada, and also Alice Munro, also from Canada. But for the second novel, I read from the second novel in the beginning, a short part. Richard Yates was actually my inspiration, because Revolutionary Road is one of my favorites, and it is because it is about a person who wants to, well, actually two persons who wants to escape from the banality of everyday life, and they don't have that much success. And I think novels are always about, no, not always, but mostly about people that are exceptions. They manage to escape from something. They are the heroes. They are the ones that are the individuals. I think the novel is the genre of the individual. And I was interested in not the individual, but not the exception, but the rule. And the question of my second novel was, how can you escape from the banality of the life if you don't have a talent to escape with? Because when you have a talent, it's easier to deal with that. And I was thinking, how do people do that? It's in general. And then I find out that if you ask people about this, they are always answering in terms of their jobs. They identify themselves or define themselves mostly with their jobs. So I think my life is useful because I'm a teacher, or my parents, for example, they are farmers, so they think they feed the world, so they are useful. And well, you can find other examples. But then I was thinking about all these people that are having jobs that are not really creative or inspiring. In the Netherlands you have them, and of course you have them in America as well. Many people that work for different companies, they are freelancers, they do some tasks, and they are not creative at all. And these people work at home. So I gave my character this kind of jobs. He works at home, and nobody sees her. She has to put information on websites of companies, and she doesn't write this information herself. She just get it, and she has to put it on the right place, so it's not creative at all. And then I was thinking, okay, if you have this kind of job, and you cannot really identify yourself, if you have it's a challenge to define yourself with your job, what else can you use? And then, of course, I was thinking, if you have a kid, you are a baby, or children, that's why I read this part in the beginning. Babies can make you feel very important because, yeah, you are important for at least this person, so it makes your life meaningful. So I gave my character a history that she doesn't really like family life, as you could hear a bit. I read it not very well because I have never read it in English before, so I apologize for that. And then I was thinking, okay, not if you don't have the babies, what then? What are the other possibilities? And then I was thinking about all these leftovers we have from the 70s, this like commune life. People start to live in communes because they didn't want to live together just because they are family, but they live together because they share ideas and ideals about making the world a better place. And I was thinking, okay, how about these communes in 2010 when people are really disappointed in, well, at least in Western Europe, about the possibilities to make the world a better place? How can they still try to do that? So that's where my second novel is about. And I think this will be already far from the first question, so I stop here.
Thank you. Okay, and the second question is, and Gerõur, I think maybe it's your turn now. In your country, what is the literary scene like right now, and how are you a part of it?
At this very moment, it's the literature. Well, the publication is blooming because we are used to talk about the publication before Christmas as the Christmas books. Between the wars, when there was not much to find in Icelandic shops, we started giving each other books as Christmas presents. So mostly all of the literature, novels and poems and short stories are published in October and November. It means that the literary life becomes a big circus. We're all fighting for attention in the media, and there are a lot of readings all over the country, and it's a whole lot of fun. And it's good to be a writer in Iceland because as other artists we get support from the Ministry of Culture and Education. We can apply every year and hoping for getting paid every month. Some people get 6 months, some people 9 months, 12, or even 2 or 3 years. So we always hope for the best, and that's what we compete also about, which means that not everybody are good friends, but that's how it goes. And the artists, sculptors, musicians, and designers and musicians get funded too. We are only, as I said, 300,000. So without this, we might have begun writing in English. And the market is small, but it means also that this language of ours, writing in Icelandic means that the language lives, that we use it, we read it, and we teach in Icelandic in schools. And that's how it is to be an Icelandic author. But now we have a government that is to the right, and they desperately want to put a horrible tax on books. So that's what we are fighting against now. And let's see what happens. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Laurynas?
Well, you know this story about the optimist and the pessimist. The optimist says the glass is half full, the pessimist says it's half empty. And I think talking about Lithuanian literary life, you cannot escape contradictions and paradoxes, because on the other hand, literature and language is what makes the modern Lithuanian identity. And anybody who considers himself Lithuanian and part of this culture, part of the language, is very closely connected with literature of past and present. On the other hand, we've gone through the turmoil of the 90s, of the post-communist era, where everything was changing, you know, socially, economically, politically, mentally, too, and that wasn't, you know, a very good time for literature. Is there a Chinese saying, I think, which is a kind of curse, you know, I wish you would live in times of turmoil or something like that. And that was that was also interesting, but at the same time difficult for literary institutions and literary community. Now the things are much better, and there is quite a bit of state support and also of public attention again for modern literature. It's also very dynamic, the literary field, and there are really changing in a couple of years. Have been so much change, and I think in general there is now a generation change happening in Lithuania, and the generation of we're now 30 or 40 years old is taking over, so to say. And since I incidentally happen to belong to the same generation, I'm quite happy about that. There is, you have always two things, just to sum it up. You have this very cozy atmosphere when you go to the festival. You know, everybody knows you, and you know everybody, and you feel really a kind of part of the family of Lithuanian writers. At the same time, you have the kind of atmosphere of the small pond, you know, where you know there is not so much space, and there are fractions, and there are personal interests and envies and so on and so forth. So I think you know, the question was also about my role in Lithuanian literary life. So from what I get, you know, from the public, from friends, and also from not friends, I guess the picture would be that they that they envy me for this opportunity of getting residencies abroad, like this one, and getting published in other countries. I think they admire me for the humor, maybe. I think they think I'm too not so much bohemian as it should be, you know, as a real Lithuanian poet should be, and maybe too intellectual. Yeah, so it's a position of a bit of the outsider, I think. But I really enjoy this position. I have good friends, dear friends, which with whom I share the kind of the ideals and the aesthetics and the kind of with whom I feel solidary a lot. And there are also the ones I don't like in the poem I read. You know, I talk to poets whom I like and whom I cannot stand. But that's life. I mean, that's how it also should be. I mean, without animosities and without conflicts, nothing good can be written, I believe.
Oh, thank you.
I wasn't wanting to end it in a kind of conflicty note, but well, I have to.
Positive. I mean, you know, the lotus from the muck. And okay, Franca, the literary scene in the Netherlands, your part in it.
Actually, I don't really know what to say about the literary scene in the Netherlands. It's we say always it's a small world. Everybody knows each other. Everybody lives in Amsterdam. You have there's a kind of division between the old writers and the young writers. The old, they are the prize-winning writers, and the young writers are complaining about that. And the young writers are always also complaining about the critics, because the critics are also like 50 plus and white and male. And the young writers, it happens that people always try to speak, and also critics to try to speak about them as a group. And I feel always a bit bad about that, because I don't think I'm part of this group, and I think the other, for me, being an artist is being an individual. So being one of the young writers, I don't see the point that much, because what has age to do with your work? Of course, that maybe the topics, but and then very recently there is a discussion about what art should do, or what writing should do. Does it have to comfort you as a reader? Does it have to make you learn something, because life is already so difficult and full with challenges? Does literature have a kind of has it to be like supporting, or can you find in literature a way of living that you maybe can use? And I think that's a stupid way of thinking about literature, but yeah, that is more or less the discussions of the last weeks. And maybe I'm not saying it well because I'm now here and I'm not reading everything too well, but yeah, that's it more or less.
Well, thank you. And before we go to Auguste, let me just say I'm from Northern Europe, and from what I hear is there's a saying that the color of Northern Europe is green, i.e. envy. So so I don't know how it is in Greece.
I'm sure there are many very interesting or exceptional writers writing Greek right now. There are also some very pretty horrible writers writing Greek. So the problem is that some of them have been around forever, so no one really comes out to say how horrible they are. The thing about it, though, is, to be perfectly honest, if it had been more exciting, you would know much more about it. And the fact that not virtually anything is known about it, I think is quite, it befits its value it's worth right now. We don't have a Kazantzakis right now. I wish we had, because he was a terrific storyteller. The language itself was god-awful, but he was a great storyteller. As you can see, I'm not a very nice person. Well, what is called in German, I don't know the German term, it's been used to describe Thomas Bernhard, the one who soiled his own nest, who fouls up his own nest. It's one of those scary German words, long and very forbidding. Now, I don't think of myself as part of this literary scene. The best thing that can be said about me, or that is said about or written about me, is that I'm the enfant terrible of modern Greek letters, which is a nice way to say the freak. I mean, I've been publishing for 15 years. It's ridiculous. I'm not an enfant any longer. I'm 35. I'm not an enfant in any way. Yes, honestly, I've read very decent novels and short stories, but it's been hard. I mean, the best Greek writers writing right now, if we got 1,000 of them, and like that hypothesis with the monkeys who might end up writing Shakespeare, if we had 1,000 Greek writers from current Greek literature writing on 1,000 typewriters, typing away, not one of them would end up with something as wonderful as The Corrections by Jonathan Franzen. So I won't bore you with it, honestly.
Well, thank you very much. I guess this is time to wrap up. And for that specific German word, be sure to contact the Library of Congress, ask a librarian. We'll have the answer for you. And thank you, Franca Treur, Laurynas Katkus, Gerõur Kristný, Auguste Corteau. Thank you.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.